Kicking off the list at number 10, glyphosate. We'll start this wacky list off with perhaps one of the coolest things that I've seen online. Also one of the weirdest things for sure. This was posted by Reddit user Thunderbolt, and it was in tons of communities. I've seen this video pop up numerous places. The internet knows me so well. It looks otherworldly. I thought this video was in slow-mo. Nope. Take a look. I had to watch it a few times. This looks like it's in slow motion, but when the camera moves away, that's clearly not the case. So what's going on here? What am I looking at? What in the avatar is going on? This is turbulent flow, and the speed matches that of the camera's shutters. It's kind of like footage of a helicopter. You know, sometimes it'll fly through the air and it looks like it's just still, just doing this. It's the weirdest thing ever. Really, it's the propellers that are matching the camera's shutter speeds. It's odd. But in this case, it's really odd. Imagine sending this to your boss to check in at work. Yeah, the ectoplasm's in slow-mo again, so it's gonna be a while. Send. Number 9, player 2 has entered. I saw this video again a while back online, as I spend most of my time on Reddit after midnight, you know, as do the rest of us. And for months now, nobody can figure out what is happening in this video. Take a look. Was he running beside the truck? How did he just appear? Was he hanging onto the side of the truck like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible? How is he so calm, cool, and collect? He waits a second after the truck pulls away. He waits a second, almost as if he's still loading. Maybe some other dimensions going on here. People are saying it's an edit, others are saying the van door was open, and then others are arguing in the comments about which doors belong on which vans. Then there's also an argument about wheels and doors, but I think that's something that's separate, that's totally separate. Whichever universe this man came from, welcome, first of all, and you've caused so many headaches already, so great start. Number 8, too many beetles. Before you get grossed out, I don't mean that type of beetle, although that would be pretty bad as well. Gross. This video was shared to the lovely world of, you guessed it, Reddit. User H. Mumberto was having just a normal day, but there's like 6 of the same car that appear out of nowhere. There's the exact same Volkswagen Beetle, same color and everything. 2 are parked, one's driving into town, another's driving out of town, and one is lost. Can't figure out which town they're in. I hope they're filming a movie or something here because this is honestly pretty creepy. I would film this as well, for sure. This is like the Truman Show in real life. Oh God, that movie messed me up when I was younger. If this was me, I wouldn't be nearly as calm as whoever's filming this video. That's so many white beetles just around in one small area. That's like in GTA 5, when you get in one car, and then all of a sudden every car around you is the exact same. You're like, what's going on here? It's trippy, it's very noticeable. I couldn't imagine seeing this in real life, so thank you for sharing. That being said, it's not bizarre for some places to manufacture the same model of a car, but this, I don't know, it's creepy. This is like definitely a glitch in the Matrix. Number 7, 3 dogs. This is the most bizarre video I've seen in a while, straight up. This was almost number 1, but we get into more of the, you know, cosmic stuff for number 1, so, you know. Animals follow each other. This is a known fact in nature, but this right here is next level. At first I thought these were 3 cats, because, you know, cats are a bit more insane than dogs. You know, if I had to bet on which animal would run into a glass window 3 times in a row, I would probably say a cat. Cats are wild. They'll stare at nothing for like 42 minutes. Creepy, I don't like that. This video shows 3 dogs confusing the hell out of a staff. It looks like a clinic of some sorts or a hospital. One dog runs into the glass, it's okay, and it runs off. Another dog does the same thing, it's okay, runs off. And then in comes a 3rd dog, just to continue confusing the staff and myself watching this video. The fact that they're all the same color and size and hits the same window, I mean, something's going on here. This is actually crazy. Maybe it's one dog and he's just really, really fast. He's just doing laps. Number 6, the cold spot. Okay, getting more cosmic now into these dimensions and parallel universes. Okay, so strap in. In 2004, NASA's WMAP satellite saw one of the most mysterious and perhaps one of the most ominous findings in science history, the cold spot. And no, I don't mean your ex's heart. Nothing is colder than that. That's another list. We'll save that one. The cold spot is, for starters, massive. When the universe was created a good, 14 billion years ago, it left some cosmic microwave background for us to explore and, just live in. Specifically, this one really cold spot of radiation. While the rest of the universe expands and cools down over time in millions of years, this area has remained colder than any of the surrounding area. Just radiation left over from the very beginning of our universe. Another theory by scientists is that this cold spot is a result of collision between 2 different universes, which is interesting. That's when things start to get a little mind-bendy. Could this spot be an icy cold doorway into another bubble universe? Perhaps the first evidence that proves the multiverse theory, aside from the show Loki? Maybe. We'll have to see. Just gotta stick around and wait for something to happen. They have that collider that may or may not help, that I may or may not talk about later on. Number 5, the Milky Sea phenomenon. I've seen this with my very own eyes, and if you get a chance to see bioluminescence in the ocean, do it. What an odd request. Everyone's like, okay, finally, it's about time. I'm gonna do it. The Milky Sea phenomenon was first observed back in 1864. Captain Raphael Semmes journaled it aboard his CSS Alabama, and he had no idea what the hell he was looking at. Even today, we don't fully understand how bioluminescence works in nature. So this captain obviously was shaken after seeing something like this. He wrote about passing from the deep blue waters into a patch of water so bright that it startled him. A startled explorer. Ah, yes, nothing worse than that. He wrote down his thoughts and feelings. Remember, this is 1864, long before the movie Avatar was out in theaters, so this is all new to human beings. Captain Raphael wrote, "The whole face of nature seemed to have changed. With a little stretch of the imagination, the CSS Alabama might have been conceived to be a phantom ship lit up by the sickly and unearthly glare of a phantom sea." That's what I'm gonna write down. What am I looking at? Guy thought he drifted into Pandora. That's quite the quote, Captain Semmes. Thank you for sharing. All those years ago. I don't think he's watching this video. That's not an exaggeration either. This phenomenon is something out of a movie. It's so alien. Bioluminescence is part of the reason for this ghostly bright blue appearance, but sailors who have experienced this say there's something sinister about it as well, so who really knows? To this day, we don't fully understand how bioluminescence works, but it's continuing to grow and blow our minds. We just discovered a glowing shark recently. Yeah, just a new shark, a new glowy shark. That's what we're dealing with now, so this captain would be surprised if he saw what we have now. The Milky Sea phenomenon can span around 100,000 square miles, so again, this one's pretty large. And it can last for a few nights, so I don't blame these sailors for getting spooked. In 2005, we got low orbit satellites to snap a pic of this phenomenon, and on a list of otherworldly dimensions, this is perhaps the most otherworldly event that happens on our planet. Number 4, Large Hadron Collider. We can't have a list on other dimensions and not talk about the Large Hadron Collider. This project is testing the laws of physics. We mentioned earlier the remnants left over from the Big Bang and all that. Well, scientists are currently trying to make another Big Bang. Well, a little bang. A smaller bang. Hopefully a smaller bang. This project was put in motion by CERN. They're trying to identify what dark matter is, seeing how, it makes up a lot of our universe. And the project also aims at trying to discover tiny black holes. And if you've seen Interstellar, this could mean a few things if done correctly. We could maybe open a door to a parallel universe. So us humans are like, you know what, let's try and smash some particles together, see what happens. So now we have a 16-mile long underground ring that blasts proton beams close to the speed of light, then they make them collide into each other, ideally creating a black hole. How fun for us. The project hasn't been successful yet, but when it is, I feel like we'll know. We'll have an idea, we'll have a feeling in our hearts, or we might turn into spaghetti instantly. We'll know something worked, or didn't, for that matter. Number 3, the Philadelphia experiment. Perhaps one of the most bizarre tales when it comes to other dimensions. And this one has credibility behind it too. It pops up in my Reddit a lot. The 1943 Philadelphia experiment. If you haven't heard of it, sorry, this is gonna upset you maybe. This World War II conspiracy theory takes place on the USS Eldridge, this destroyer-class ship, and they were conducting these secret experiments aboard this ship to gain power over naval warfare. One of these experiments was to create this technology that makes ships invisible. On radar. That's an important note. Invisible on radar, not like... But when the generators were fired up to try this, the hull apparently lit up with this green and blue light, then the ship actually disappeared. Invisible IRL, not just radar. It was then seen at a naval shipyard in Virginia before the same thing happened again, and then it appeared back in Philadelphia, apparently. This sounds intense as is, but when you hear about the crew on board, it gets pretty scary. Some, of course, went mad after the dimensional dip, while others had physical effects from the cosmic commute. Yeah, some haunting details in that one. Some dude's arm was like just in the wall or something. It was horrible. I can't even talk about it on YouTube. It's gross. Number 2, Tartarus. Okay, we're getting a bit historical in the other dimensions for this one now. Number 2 and 1, we're getting deep. Greek mythology, here we go. According to Greek mythology, I'm talking like way back in 700 BC, Tartarus was a deep abyss. A dungeon, really, full of, suffering and torture and everything bad that you can think of, just, probably in there. This place full of suffering, of course, resides in Hades. If you played the game Hades, you know exactly where I'm talking about. It's the second world. It's so hard. Hades is a realm where the dead go after their, time is run out. It doesn't mean that it's a fiery abyss per se, that's just where Tartarus comes in. Tartarus is where the underworld devil theme kicks in. Plato wrote about these souls of the dead and how they were judged, and after they, would have to cross a river of the dead and all that stuff. So that's definitely some other dimension stuff that we're talking about there when it comes to the religious history. If you weren't a great human being, you were of course judged as so, and subsequently you were sent to Tartarus. the bad place. In Greek poet Hesiod's Theogony, Tartarus was offspring of Aether and Gaia. They were the third of the primordial deities. Even Zeus mentioned this place in the Iliad. Zeus states that Tartarus is as far beneath Hades as heaven is high above earth. So that's a lot of dimensions. We're in the middle right now, which is nice. I want to stay here. I'm like, maybe. Definitely not. Here, we're good. And finally, number 1, Duat. The Egyptian afterlife. Yeah, we don't have photos of this one, but we have some really old art, which is almost more compelling. Otherwise known as the Fields of Reeds or Fields of Offering, Duat is a place ancient Egyptians believed came after life. In fact, they believed that life on earth was just a mere fraction of an eternal life that we're meant to live. Not ending in death, but rather forever lasting in peace and harmony. Doesn't that sound great? We love that. They believed there was more to the body failing. The soul must continue. It must go on somewhere. Born on earth, believing in the gods and the deities known as the Seven Hathors, once death did arrive, you're just entering another realm. But hopefully the gods have judged you so you can live in this paradise realm known as the Fields of Reeds. Not Duat. You want that one, definitely not the other one. The thing is, you don't just pass on and then enter this nice realm where you can drink wine and, two-step with your relatives. No, you have to earn your spot. You have to show the gods that you're a good human being. This paradise is just really a mirror image of your previous mortal life. So if you're not kind to others now, well, this field of dreams can easily turn into a field of eternal nightmares. Ancient Egyptians' beliefs in hell predates Jewish, Christian, and Islamic visions. The concept of hell in ancient Egypt predates the concept of hell in more of these modern religions, which is kind of baffling. With the god Osiris believed to be the lord of said underworld, we have the coffin texts and the Book of the Dead now to study up while we're still, living like lousy mortals. Maybe the Egyptians were onto something here. Maybe the sky really is an iron container of water for the gods. Maybe we have to earn our spot in this cosmos. I don't know. One way or another, there's definitely more than one dimension. Either cats or Egyptian afterlives. We're gonna see one of the two.
At number 10, parkour gone wrong. I'm sure you've all seen an example of parkour before, but I would personally describe it as people launching themselves from one spot to the next, avoiding injury by the skin of their teeth. Often done outdoors, some of the maneuvers these people do are seemingly impossible. While it takes a lot of practice and coordination, this sport can also be super dangerous. Parkour daredevils like to take things quite literally to the next level, and as heights get higher and tricks get more technical, disaster is not far behind. Pavel Kashin was a Russian parkour artist who unfortunately learned his lesson the hard way. In 2013, he was performing a stunt on the rooftop of a 16-story building with a friend filming. They ended up capturing the final moments of Kashin's life. He was one of the well-known parkour artists or freerunners, being named one of the best in the world, who's known for his breakthrough stunts, which you can still find videos of today. On the day of his passing, Kashin was standing on a 3-foot wide ledge on the top of an apartment building. The daredevil decided to do a backflip on this very small ledge, with him completing the trick only to lose his footing on the landing and be sent over the edge. Kashin's fans and fellow members of the parkour community showed their support and sent respects to his family. His friends uploaded the final image of Pavel mid-flip with the permission of his parents to the web. Kashin's parents hoped that the image would deter others from doing the same as their son. Number 9. Winterbine fire. If you have ever seen a winterbine in real life before, you will know just how massive the energy converting monsters actually are. In October 2013, 2 workers were doing routine maintenance to a 67-meter high turbine in Oltensplaat, Netherlands. Don't come for me, I know I butchered that name, but while they were doing this maintenance, a fire broke out, quickly engulfing the only escape route, trapping the workers high above the ground. Due to the height of the fire, the firefighters had a hard time reaching the fire to put it out, so a specialized crew of firefighters were called in with a large crane. Unfortunately, this took hours, which the technicians did not have. In their last moments, a photo of the tragedy was snapped, and in it you can see the turbine in a blaze, but you can also see the 2 workers embracing in their final moments. The image just amplifies how big the turbine actually is and shows how hopeless a rescue mission would have been. The men were just 19 and 21 at the time. One tried one last effort to survive, with one man jumping from the wind turbine in the last effort to save himself, and the other tried to scale down the side only to be caught up in the blaze. The man who jumped was found in a field next to the turbine, and the other was found when firefighters were able to finally climb to the turbine. The cause of the fire is unknown, but believed to be a short circuit. While this freak accident ended up taking 2 lives, the tragedy led to a political inquiry into safety precautions for wind turbine maintenance crews. Their final photo together was sad, but it was nice that in their final moments they did have each other. Number 8. Racing to disaster. Gary Box was one of the many firefighters who was there on 9/11, risking it all in order to save lives. Unfortunately, he was also one of the many who never made it home after that day. Hours before heroically losing his life, Box was photographed racing towards the disaster. The image was taken in the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel by a pedestrian in their car. Their engine got stuck in the traffic of the tunnel, so in full gear, carrying as much as they could, Box and the rest of his crew started running on foot to ground zero. Gary was 35 at the time and his remains were never recovered. All images taken that day I'm sure have something haunting about them, but knowing how little time he had left is another level. At number 7, Ronaldo Dagsa. He was a Filipino politician, a member of the Peacekeeping Action Team, and a corporal in the Philippine Army Reserve Command. Now this photo is not of Dagsa before he passed, but due to how haunting it is, I still had to include it. His passing achieved notoriety due to the picture he snapped of his family on New Year's with unbelievable timing. The image Dagsa captured also inadvertently captured the man who was about to take the shot that would ultimately take his life. The photo was extremely helpful when it came to investigators identifying the shooter because the image shows the gunman quite literally seconds before taking the fatal shot. The picture was taken outside the councilman's house in metropolitan Manila. The photo led to a quick arrest of the shooter as well as his accomplice. Apparently the suspects were known car thieves out on bail, likely holding a grudge against Dagsa, who had the men arrested a year earlier. It is extremely sad that Dagsa unknowingly captured his own final moments, especially with his family being right there, but at least they were able to use it to catch the gunman. Number 6. Discount Flight. Keith Sapsford was from Randwick, New South Wales. He passed away just 14 years old with his final moments caught on camera. On February 22, 1970, the teen snuck onto the tarmac at Sydney Airport in Australia with the idea to hide inside a Tokyo-bound plane in order to run away. Unfortunately, Sapsford would never make it to Tokyo. His father described Keith as a curious kid who always had an urge to keep on the move. Due to his restlessness, his parents decided to send him to Boys Town, a Roman Catholic institution specializing in troubled children, for some discipline and structure. Instead, Sapsford escaped from the facility after a couple weeks and headed to the airport. Thanks to the far more relaxed regulations and security of the 70s, Sapsford was able to sneak onto the tarmac with ease. It's unknown if Keith knew where the plane was headed, but he saw a plane preparing for boarding and climbed into its wheel well. It took a few hours for the plane to take off, but eventually it made its way to the sky. What Keith didn't know was that the plane was going to reopen the wheel compartments to retract the wheels. When this happened, Sapsford fell out of the plane, falling 200 feet. One of the craziest things about this tragic event was by pure coincidence. Photographer John Gilpin was simply taking pictures at the airport when he unknowingly snapped a pic at the exact same time Sapsford was falling from the plane. I bet when he developed that roll of film, he was totally surprised. His father later said, "All my son wanted to do was see the world. He had itchy feet and his determination to see how the rest of the world lives cost him his life." Obviously what happened to Keith was a tragedy, but the photo captured by Gilpin is remarkable as well as haunting. At number 5. Fatal Friend. Brittany Gargle and Cheyenne Antoine were the best of friends until they weren't. Apparently Brittany was extremely hardworking. At 16 she was juggling school and 2 jobs. Antoine had a rough upbringing with her parents falling into substance use. Cheyenne grew up in foster care. At 15, Antoine's mother passed away, and to cope with the news she got involved with some dangerous company, also falling into substance use. That's when the two girls met, and Brittany helped Cheyenne manage her feelings and the two became close. On March 25, 2015, Brittany posted a picture of her and Cheyenne on social media. The two planned to go out for drinks and have fun, but as the night went on, things got out of hand and the details became fuzzy. The girls traveled to a pub, then to a house party, and then one more pub. Cheyenne claimed that around 4 a.m. Brittany asked a man for a lighter and invited him for drinks, but she didn't know what happened later. Cheyenne heard nothing from Brittany the next day, and later the police received a 911 call of a woman lying on her back, cold to the touch. The woman was identified as Brittany. Cheyenne was questioned and her story checked out, but the police thought she was hiding something. As the police dug further, more details came out. In the end, Brittany's passing was ruled a strangling, and this led them to a crucial lead. It was the picture Cheyenne had posted on social media the night of the events. In it, Cheyenne was wearing a stylish black belt, the same belt that had been found at the crime scene. In 2017, after all the evidence collected, Cheyenne was arrested for taking Brittany's life, with Cheyenne claiming not to remember anything due to the substances. In the end, Cheyenne was sentenced to 7 years in prison, with her release in 2024. At number 4, The Final Dive. Nicholas Mivoli was an American free diver who passed doing what he loved, but not before taking a picture that will give give you the chills. Mavoli began freediving competitively in 2012, winning titles twice at the Deja Blue competition and finishing third at the Caribbean Cup in Honduras. With much success in his newfound passion, Mavoli only wanted to take things even further. On November 15, 2013, he prepared to dive into Dean's Blue Hole, hoping to reach 72 meters on a single inhalation with no fins or supplemental oxygen. Surrounded by 15 other athletes and observers as well as 5 safety divers, he submerged face first, looking like a human arrow diving into the darkness that would ultimately end up being his last dive. Mike Board, freediving record holder, said diving into a depth with no fins, that's a hard physical dive. I was thinking, okay, he's going to have a hard time getting up. Yet after a dive of 3 minutes and 38 seconds, Mavoli shot back up to the surface. Unfortunately, instead of celebrating the dive, things quickly turned into a nightmare. Mavoli ripped off his goggles, flashed the OK sign, and attempted to complete surface protocol that would make the attempt official by saying, "I am okay." But he wasn't. His words came out jumbled and his eyes were wide and blank. This moment was captured on camera, and the blank fear in the diver's eyes is frightening. He lost consciousness and never regained it after suffering a pulmonary edema. Number 3. Dyatlov Pass Mystery. The Dyatlov Pass incident was the event in which 9 Soviet trekkers passed away in the northern Ural Mountains between February 1st and 2nd, 1959 in uncertain circumstances. There are many theories as to what caused the tragedy, but ultimately it's a mystery. The experienced trekking group from the Eerie Polytechnic Institute was led by Igor Dyatlov. Overnight, something seemingly caused the group to cut their way out of their tent from inside and flee the campsite. While them cutting open their tent from the inside is confusing enough, the bodies found were improperly dressed for the heavy snowfall and the freezing temperatures. As the story goes on, things only get further from making sense. After the bodies were discovered, Soviet authorities determined that 6 had passed from hypothermia, while the other 3 suffered physical trauma. 1 had major skull damage, 2 severe chest trauma, and another had a small skull fracture. 4 of the bodies were found lying in a creek, and 3 of those bodies had soft tissue damage to the head and face. 2 bodies were missing eyes, 1 missing a tongue, and another had missing eyebrows. Now, if it had just been the hypothermia, this case would be totally different, but what the heck did all this physical damage in the middle of nowhere? While we aren't sure exactly what went down, there are lots of pictures of the group's final days as well as plenty of theories. There was a new investigation opened in 2019 calling it an avalanche, but I don't know still. Does an avalanche really remove your tongue and eyeballs? Number 2. Miracle of the Andes. On October 13, 1972, Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571, chartered by an amateur rugby team, crashed into the Andes Mountains. The wreckage of the crash was not located for more than 2 months. There were only 16 out of 45 who survived the whole thing, with the incident gaining international attention after it was revealed the survivors had resorted to cannibalism. Due to the bad weather, the pilot of the plane misjudged their location, and the plane ended up striking a mountain, losing both wings before crashing into a remote valley of Argentina, near the Chilean border. A search party was sent out, but due to the white plane on the white snow, it was unable to be spotted from above. After 8 days, the search was called off, thinking there were no survivors, though later rescue efforts were taken over by family. There were initially 33 survivors, but due to the elements, injuries, and an avalanche, the numbers were shrinking. Several survivors surveyed the area for an escape route. On December 12th, almost exactly 2 months since the crash, 3 men set out to go find help. Though one did return to the crash site after a difficult trek, the other 2 men finally came across some people. It was December 20th now, and the people they found alerted the authorities. On December 22nd, 6 survivors were flown to safety, but bad weather meant the remaining 8 waited until the 23rd. There are photos from both before the crash of the group. On the plane and after of the group surrounding the fallen plane, as well as books and a movie about the incident. And at number 1, solo hike. In 2014, 2 women, Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon, were visiting Panama from the Netherlands, and on April 1st they went on a walk through the scenic forest near the Baru volcano, only to never return. Alarm was raised the day after they didn't return from their hike, and a search party was sent out right away, only to find no sign of Kremers or Froon. A while later, a local woman found Froon's backpack. In the bag, they found her camera, 2 pairs of sunglasses, some cash, her passport, a water bottle, 2 bras, and both the women's phones. Probably the most concerning they found were the final images taken on the camera. All of the photos from April 1st are just the 2 women exploring the jungle. Then there are no pictures until April 8th, when 90 unsettling pictures were taken with the flash in the middle of the jungle, timestamped between 1 and 4 a.m. Most of these images are of complete darkness and the jungle floor, but there are 2 very alarming pics. One shows some of the women's belongings on a rock, and the other looks like the back of Kremer's head with what appears to be bloodstain in her hair. Something else suspicious about the camera is that image 509 was missing, with 508 being the last of them looking okay, and image 510 being the first in the darkness days later. They found a pelvic bone and a foot still inside a boot. Froon's bones appeared to decompose naturally, but Kremer seemed to be stark white as if they'd been bleached, further leading to question if someone else was involved.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the tulip staircase. We'll dive right into this spooky goodness with a 1966 classic. This photo looks like the cover of a horror movie or a Kendrick Lamar album. It looks set up, right? It looks nice. The black and white hue with the ghostly figure slowly making its way up the tulip staircase, okay? This photo is from 1966, and experts in photography all agree that this photo here has not been tampered with at all. So how scary is that? Makes you ask some questions, right? We didn't have Photoshop or deepfakes back in 1966. We barely had a camera, right? Haunting, yes, but since it looks almost too good to be true, we'll leave this at number 10. Let's move on. Number 9, power problems. This one's for sure real. Went from maybe to definitely real. This comes from a middle-aged man in Oxford, North Carolina. It was his day off work. He was looking to relax all day, just kick back and hang out in the house. Then out of nowhere, on his day off, the lights start to flicker, and immediately the smoke detector also goes off. What's happening? The lights were flickering all over the house, not just in one room. The fridge, the bathroom, any light at all, it was flickering. Even the water started to run by itself, so no, it was not an electrical issue. He filmed all these happenings, of course, but when he looked back on all the footage, you know, after running to safety, he caught this photo of a demon peeking from the other room. Check it out. There's another peeking demon photo on this list. I don't know what it is about demons, but they like peeking out at you. Yeah, it's haunting. Stay tuned. Number 8, house guest. For this next one, we'll be taking a look at a video. I know, I said demon photos. This one's so small that it may as well be a photo. Nothing too crazy happens. Check it out. Keep an eye on the staircase next to the kitchen. Didn't see anything? Okay, what about now? This footage was taken August 8th, 2019. It's around 1 a.m. in the home of an unnamed family. Always a good sign. I've seen too many of those paranormal activity movies to watch this. This is creepy. I wouldn't even be able to watch footage of my own house with those like hidden cameras, you know what I mean? Like I'd be afraid to go through and scroll. What if I find something? Then what? The cat doesn't notice anything in this video, which is either a really good sign or a really bad sign. Because cats see everything, right? They're so mischievous. Cats will be like mid-conversation and all of a sudden just... Number 7, playtime. We know demons like to play games, I guess, so this next one here seems rather fitting. Seeing as it takes place in a Toys R Us. Yeah, you heard me. Bay Area's haunted Toys R Us. They locked its doors forever as of 2018. The aisles may be closed, but do the ghosts still haunt the building? Are there haunted toys walking around? Is there a haunted Buzz Lightyear that's gonna come out and extend its wings at me? The Sunnyvale Toys R Us demon appeared in the background of this photo. Others seen in this photo, you know, people who aren't demons, they all swear nobody else was there at the time of this photo. Nobody haunting, at least. Could this be a spirit caught in a photo that just happens to be at a Toys R Us? I mean, it's kind of funny, but like, you know, ghosts don't have to haunt scary things. They can haunt normal things too. They can haunt hotels, they can haunt old restaurants, and Toys R Us apparently. I don't know. Demons are demons. They can do what they want. Employees have talked about creepy things happening at night at this location. It's not the only time it's happened. Yeah, fun. It turns out that Sunnyvale store is indeed haunted by more than one ghost. The store stood where the Murphy farm once stood, so many think it's the spirit of Johnny Johnson. I don't know, sounds like a Ghost Rider villain. This sounds kind of like a made up story. But who knows? Ouija boards are considered toys. Can you believe that? So maybe he's just trying to get a phone. Maybe he's trying to get a new phone plan. I don't know. Number 6, Coventry Society Demon. When it comes to these old-timey photos, everybody looks like a ghost no matter what, right? It's always blurry, it's black and white, there's smudges that appear all over the place. So sometimes when you see them, you want to give it a good idea. You're like, oh, maybe it's not a demon, maybe it's a nice ghost. Maybe it's someone who I know who has passed away, and this specific smudge here is them coming to visit. Sure, I'm not gonna knock that, that's a great idea, awesome. Well, it's nice to believe that photos like this from the Coventry Freeman Society shows everybody that demons might actually be real. This event has everybody dressed to the nines, but when you look at the top left over here, you see a hooded figure. Somebody that clearly doesn't belong with the vibe in this room. I don't know what kind of party this is, but this dude does not blend in. He got the wrong memo. He's like, oh, I thought you said it was like a costume kind of thing with like hoods. They're like, no, it's formal, Roger, come on. Nobody else was seen wearing a hood like this, so many believe it was a dark part of the afterlife. Just, you know, photobombing this event. Demons, always pranksters, hopping in at photos, peeking around corners. Classic, they like pranks. Number 5, the Amityville photo. This photo was taken inside the Amityville house back in 1976. It appears to be a young boy with glowing white eyes. He's pretty hard to miss there. See him? Right there, yeah, you got it, nice, good eye. At first, I thought this was from a horror movie that I missed, you know? Like, it looks so obviously fake or set up in some way, until you start to read up on the details. This photo was taken with automatic cameras equipped with infrared, so this young lad here probably wasn't expecting a selfie. Photographer Gene Campbell took this photo in 1976, and Gene at the time was working with paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. So that's how you know this bit of history here is real, to some degree. The photo was revealed 3 years after it was taken on the Merv Griffin show, and many believe this is the ghost of the young John DeFeo, one of the boys who lived there in 1974. Number 4, the specter of Newby Church. From all the way back in 1963, this photo has been passed around from time to time. We've mentioned it on this channel before, it's pretty good. It's one of the most convincing if you ask me, considering its date. Is this the demon of General Grievous from Star Wars? This guy's, what is going on here? He's haunting, very tall. Looks like he has 4 lightsabers. Reverend K.F. Lord took this photo in England at the Newby Church, and Lord ensures us that this photo is 100% real. Would anybody named Lord lie to us? You know? I'm just saying. I think not. The photo looks too good to be true, I'll admit. I mean, this entity is literally facing the camera, you know, so I get it. The figure appears to stand on the first step of the altar, yet somehow it's still taller than the altar. Super Tall Demons from 1963. This was almost number 1. Almost. You'll see. Number 3, a helping hand. This photo is pretty old, hence convincing. This time the photographer may or may not have caught a floating spirit hands. Apparently they're a thing. Awesome. I'll show you the photo, you let me know if you see it at first. Take a good look. Anything sticking out? Any little creepy hands crawling around? No? This photo is a group of women who worked in a linen factory. The lady on the far right appears she has an extra hand there, resting on her shoulder. At a weird angle too. Maybe she was scratching her back and then it was like, hey, cheese. You know? No, it's impossible. I did the math. I tried. There's no way. I'm a lanky guy. I tried this in the office. There's no way. This is definitely a demon hand. It looks curled almost, the hand. Like, I don't want to roast somebody's hand and say it looks demonic. It's just the fact that we can see the open space next to the right of the lady in the photo and there's nobody standing there. That's what makes this convincing. I'm not like, oh, it's a skinny, veiny hand. That's got to be a ghost. Some guy's like, thanks, man. What? No, there's no one standing there, that's the whole point. This reminds me of the movie Idle Hands. This gives me the creeps. That movie scared me growing up, I don't like it. Phantom hands, no thank you. Unless you're hitting that thumbs up there shall be no phantom hands in my premise. Number 2, ancient Egyptian demon paintings. Yes, I said paintings, okay? Hear me out. This list is full of the most convincing paranormal photos on the internet, but I had to toss in a little treat, a little historical treat. Demons have been putting fear into the minds of ancient Egyptians even 4,000 years ago. Yeah, demonology is not a new thing. It's not like horror movies came out and it's like, oh, there's demons now. Old, really old. Back in 2016, Whale Sherbany, who specializes in ancient religious texts, found the image of not 1, but 2 demons. They found them painted on 2 Middle Kingdom coffins. The demon represented here is the demon Ikinti. It's represented as a large bird with a cat's head, a black cat's head. This evidence was presented at the International Conference on Ancient Egyptian Demonology over at Swansea University in the United Kingdom. Am I attending the wrong meetings in life? I need to go check out some ancient Egyptian demonology conferences. That sounds like a great time. What? Another example of demons being present in ancient Egyptian days was the image of Amut. Amut is a female demon whose body was part hippo, part crocodile, and part lion. Hard to miss. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Manila Demon. No, I didn't say vanilla demon. That sounds delicious. This is much scarier. This is one of my biggest fears in life, okay? To go on a trip, take a bunch of photos with a wind-up camera, that would be the worst. come back and then find something haunting that I missed in real life in the photos, right? That's like every horror movie, it's the worst. That's exactly what happened when two friends posed for a photo together in the Philippines. This was back in 2000. At the time, they didn't feel anybody grab their arm, which I fully believe because there's no reaction in this photo. Also, if somebody was that close, somebody they didn't know, there's no chance they would sneak into the frame that quickly. Also, is this demon Dobby the house elf? What? This is not a haunting look, but it's definitely a look. It looks like a bridge troll with tiny hands. But either way, I'm all set.
Starting off this countdown, we have experimental electrical stimulation. Taken in 1856, this photo shows a man undergoing an experiment with electrical stimulation. And by the looks of it, it was quite painful. So back then, they would use this stimulation for a number of reasons. 1, to manipulate and experiment on one's nervous system, and 2, to treat certain diseases and disorders. Nowadays, this treatment is much safer. They use it to help with injured muscles or manipulate nerves to reduce pain. But back then, they were still trying to get it right. So it makes you wonder how many people underwent these painful experiments, and how many people were accidentally killed before they found the correct voltage to use. In our 9th spot today, we have the lipstick killer. And if you're liking this video so far, then smash that like button because it really helps us out. William George Herons was an American criminal and potential serial killer that confessed to be the lipstick killer. The lipstick killer was someone who took the lives of a number of women and would often leave a creepy message at the scene of the crime in lipstick. That's how he got the name, lipstick killer. The photo I'm about to share with you was a creepy message that he left at the scene of one of his crimes in 1945. He wrote, "For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself." Now this message is creepy for a number of reasons. First, you got a man on the loose who can't control his impulses and he just admitted it. And second, look how creepy it just looks with the lipstick smeared everywhere and such. It took the police 6 more months from the time this message was written to finally catch William. This photo is just a scary and dark reminder of the horrors this man committed. Moving on to number 8, we have the poverty. This photo from 1948 shows just how bad poverty was in the 1940s to 50s in America. This is when the poverty rate was at its highest. In this photo, Mr. and Miss Ray Shalafo were facing eviction from their Chicago apartment. They were so desperate for money that they had to sell their kids. Now this photo was a staged photo, but it still shows a heartbroken mother not knowing what else to do. Within 2 years, all 4 kids were sold into different homes. It also sheds the light on how different laws were back then. Nowadays, that is very much illegal to do. Anyways, this is a very heartbreaking photo. Like, I can't imagine what that family went through. Moving on to number 7, we have the nuclear shadow. On August 6, 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The bomb was so powerful that people up to a mile of it were vaporized. All that was left of them was their shadows burnt into stone. This is a creepy image that shows one of the bomb's victims. It's a silhouette of an elderly man or woman with a cane. So the bomb's light and heat were so powerful that it bleached any exposed surfaces. In this case, the person's body shielded that part on the sidewalk, and that's why an imprint was left there. All around Hiroshima, there were multiple of these body outlines. It's very disturbing and sad. It just shows their final moments alive. In our 6th spot today, we have the Stanford Prison Experiment. The Stanford Prison Experiment set out to explore the psychological effects of imprisonment. It started on August 14th, 1971. A university psychology professor gathered a bunch of student volunteers and divided them into groups. 11 were assigned the role of guards and 10 were assigned the role of prisoners. It's going to be a 2-week experiment where the volunteers would play their part in a make-believe prison. But the experiment had to be ended after only 6 days. The volunteers got way into character. Some guards turned sadistic. They really exercised their power over the prisoners, whereas many prisoners became depressed and showed signs of extreme stress. The study and this creepy photo provide a chilling look at what humans are capable of. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Wild Man suit. Not only is this a dark photo from history, but it's also a very mysterious one. This suit that you're seeing is what historians named the Wild Man suit. It consists of a double-layered set of armor covered in 1-inch long iron nails. What was it used for, you may ask? Well, no one knows for sure. One popular theory is that it was used during bear hunting in the 1800s, or it was used in bear baiting. Don't know if that's true, but it looks very uncomfortable to wear. Maybe it was a twisted torture device. The executioner would wear it and then give the prisoner a nice big and tight hug. I don't know, I'm just guessing, but either way it's messed up. In our 4th spot today, we have the ruins of Hiroshima. Here is another very scary and sad photo taken after America dropped a a bomb on Hiroshima. The bomb had an explosive yield equal to 15,000 tons of TNT. In fact, it destroyed 5 square miles of the city. This photo shows the ruins of the once beautiful city. Buildings and wildlife were completely destroyed by this bomb. In fact, the US remains to be the only country to ever use an atomic bomb in war. It had a huge lasting impact on the city that we should never forget about. In our third spot today, we have the Titanic. On April 15th, 1912, the infamous ship the Titanic began to sink. 1,500 passengers sank with the ship after it hit an iceberg during its maiden voyage. The few that did manage to survive fled on lifeboats. This is a picture of the last lifeboat approaching the rescue ship. You can see it was crammed with passengers as all the lifeboats were. This photo serves as a reminder of this great tragedy in history and all the innocent individuals that were impacted by this disaster. In our second spot today, we have the San Francisco earthquake of 1906. In 1906, San Francisco was hit with a massive 7.9 magnitude earthquake. It has since garnered the title of the most powerful earthquake in Northern Californian history. This earthquake not only caused homes to come crumbling down, but it also started a number of fires throughout the city. Hundreds of fires started as a result of the broken gas lines. These fires went on for 3 days, engulfing 500 city blocks. More than 3,000 people passed away from the earthquake and fires. 20,000 buildings were destroyed and 200,000 citizens were left homeless. It was very sad and tragic. This is a photo from this devastating time. This was after all the damage was done. People lined the streets and just stared at the destruction that the earthquake caused. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the American buffalo. Now this photo is absolutely heartbreaking. This was taken in 1892 Michigan, and that is an actual mountain made up of buffalo skulls. That means thousands of buffaloes were slaughtered. No wonder why the buffalo population is considered near threatened and are at risk for extinction. So these skulls were then ground down to be used in making bone china or refining sugar and producing fertilizer. It's said that around the end of the 18th century, there were between 30 to 60 million buffaloes on the continent. When this photo was taken, the population was at only 456. They literally slaughtered millions of buffalo. What makes it worse is that some of the buffalo were killed purposely just so that the indigenous individuals were deprived of them.
Kicking off our list at number 10, the reindeer gift. We'll turn the clocks back to 1941 right off the hop. When the Germans were attacking the Soviet Union, it was of course one of the biggest attacks in history. Britain and the United States had to send over weapons, supplies, anything really just to keep them afloat, just to keep them in the fight. Now they sent these supplies through the Arctic Circle, that was the only route, but of course it was littered with U-boats, you know, war stuff. So thankfully the British HMS Trident was there to watch the waters, and in turn the Soviets were able to fight on. As a gift, as a thank you rather, the Soviets sent the captain of the Trident, they sent him a live reindeer that the British of course had to accept because it was ill-mannered if you don't. So they had to keep a 6-foot tall, real-life living reindeer on a submarine. Must be comfortable, awesome. Imagine the smell. Her name was Pollyanna and they brought her on board through a torpedo tube. She was tiny, she's the cutest little thing. She was a crew member for 6 weeks, which is honestly hilarious because you know some of those guys got way too attached, you know for sure. She slept better than most, if I'm being honest. She shared her room in the captain's quarters. Again, imagine the smell. I don't know, is it worth it? I've always wanted a baby goat growing up, so this is kind of the closest thing. I'm jealous, I'm weirdly jealous. Number 9, Stalin Photoshop. Deepfakes are getting out of hand. I have no idea what's real or what's fake anymore. To be honest, I'm not even Taylor. I'm actually Olivia doing a list right now, but it's been deepfaked so well that you believe it. Modern technology is really making it hard to tell what's real and what's not, but it goes back. Back in 1939, a photo of Stalin was published, and he looks normal. He actually looks kind of great. Some would say he looks way too good. You know what I mean? He was touching up photos as far back as 1939, just airbrushing, just digitally removing all those zits and stuff. Like really? That far back? But even if you got a photo with Stalin, there's a chance that you yourself would be digitally removed. Like Nikolai Yevtsov, for example, the leader of the NKVD. He was in a photo with Stalin, but around 1937, Nikolai was responsible for orders that had over 1 million people arrested. So it wasn't ideal to be in a photo with Nikolai at the time. So he was denounced, imprisoned, and he died in 1940. So Stalin had him digitally erased and replaced in a photo. That's pretty hilarious. I don't know, this man was ahead of his time via Photoshop. How did he do it? How did they do it? No one knows. Number 8, Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. Nice, I remember this one. I heard about this on LimeWire. That was cool. Heard about that at full volume. This was a huge presidential scandal. Back when you know, didn't happen every other week and stuff, this was a big deal. It was 1998 and Clinton's White House intern Monica Lewinsky was 22 years old at the time. Yeah, young. When you think back to all this old history, you're like, oh, they were this. No, very young, extremely young. They had a from 1995 to 1997, despite what LimeWire told us. Lewinsky said she hooked up with Bill 9 different times at the White House, and apparently, according to her schedule, Hillary Clinton was at the White House for at least 7 of those times. She's like, what's going on in there, huh? Is that my... Who is that? Number 7, adhesive bras. We'll liven this up a little bit with some vintage history it's kind of funny. It's pretty funny. Let's talk about sticky bras, shall we? What a mess this was, oh my. Back in 1949, Life magazine released an article that caught everybody's attention, obviously. This was news, this was like a new technology that was being announced. It was May 16th, 1949, and the article read, for 5,000 years, clothes have been draped, tied, buttoned, pinned, and buckled on the human form. This year, for the first time in history, drumroll, they will be glued on. What in the world? How? This is witchcraft. How did that happen? Just 1, 2, that's it? That's easy. Inventor Charles Langs changed the game, or he thought he did, in 1949. He made these bra cups that would stick to you with adhesive. This, special glue. This specific adhesive was promised to leave behind no residue, it was supposed to be painless, yet at the same time, stay glued on even if you were to jump into a pool from a 10-foot diving board. That was the sell. Yeah, well, that's not true. That's definitely not true. Well, Langs ended up selling the company to Textron later on, and the product ultimately failed. Number 6, nuclear site list. All right, back to the dark stuff. Here on Most Amazing, we love lists, right? I'm not sure if you can tell. Smash that thumbs up, hit subscribe, yada yada, we love it. But apparently the US government also fancies a list or two. Who thought? Back when Obama was still running the show, a report was delivered to Congress, or rather it was supposed to be. The 266-page report featuring, every nook and cranny about the US nuclear program. It was released publicly on the government printing office's website in draft form. Draft form, couldn't have been easier, just a casual PDF that shows us maps with stockpiled fuel used for nuclear warheads. Awesome, right next to your resume. Imagine that, so convenient. How does this even happen? I thought this type of stuff could never happen, right? Well, MIT professor John M. Deutsch said that these screw-ups do of course happen and it's normal, and this one here isn't a serious breach. I mean, it certainly sounds serious, but okay. We'll just have to trust the government. Number 5, UFOs in the ocean. This video here was leaked in the last couple of years. You've probably seen it, hopefully not. This would be a great day. The footage itself was recorded in 2019 in San Diego. Now the Pentagon has since of course confirmed its authenticity, and the UAP, the unidentified aerial phenomenon here, is sphere-shaped and it's flying at extremely high speeds. There's no exhaust, no propulsion system whatsoever. It's just a metal ball whipping by San Diego, and now we're questioning our beliefs, so that's fun. The sphere vanished into the water afterwards, into the ocean, and then was never seen ever again. Number 4, radar footage. Now normally when we see leaked footage, be it of UAPs or leaked documents, whatever, it's always the worst quality. Like that one, not the best, right? Not quite 4K. It's hard to believe when military footage is poor quality, right? Like how can we see photos of black holes and not even have a photo of a UAP yet, right? What's going on here? Well, Jeremy Corbell, he's here to help. Jeremy? What if he just walked in? That would be crazy. He's not here, that's insane. Jeremy took to Twitter in May 2021 sharing footage of US Navy ships being swarmed by UFOs, like more than one. Sorry, UAPs. We're not gonna call them that anymore. Now this time we have radar footage, and that's pretty sweet, that's different. It came from the Combat Information Center aboard the USS Omaha. The 46-second clip was originally recorded July 15th, 2019. You can even hear people in the background reacting to what's happening in real time. You hear panic in their voices. These military personnel, in the background, you can overhear them talking about how fast the objects are moving on the radar. So, seems very believable this time, right? It's not just a grainy footage. It's like a live reaction kind of. And if he's spooked, we're spooked, right? Number 3. Watergate. I have to include Watergate, right? It's one of the biggest scandals in US history. Right in the middle of 1972, there were 5 men who were all arrested for breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. It was clear that they intended on bugging the place, right? It was fishy, it was obvious, they looked like and spy kids, right? They were up to no good. Now, as the year went on, the election came closer and closer, and all of a sudden, out of the woodwork comes this anonymous source who fed information to Washington Post that the Watergate bugging incident was a massive campaign of political spying and sabotage kicked off by none other than President Nixon himself. It was kicked off by his re-election and directed by officials of the White House. It was a whole planned thing. Now, despite this information leak and it being reported to the news, Nixon was still re-elected. Now, these men were clearly linked to a fundraising group for Nixon, but his administration just kept denying any involvement, right? That's the key. Deny, deny, deny. It wasn't until later that year in 1972 when reporters Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward, they came forward and exposed everything. Now we got the truth. They exposed the administrator's role in the entire scandal, how they had an inside source, an FBI agent named Mark Felt. It was a whole thing. This ultimately led to Nixon resigning in 1974, the first ever president to do so. Yeah, that's how you know you got caught, when you have to resign. Know what I mean? Number 2, shadow brokers. Back in August 2016, a group named the Shadow Brokers were the talk of the town. And with that name, how can you not be, right? The shadow brokers would steal cyber weapons from an NSA hacking unit and then proceed to sell them online to the highest bidder. Now, this sounds made up. This sounds like it's from a movie. This is crazy, right? Now, these tools in question, these cyber weapons, they've been used by many countries and many not so great sounding schemes. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, you name it, these cyber attacks can happen anywhere, right? The 2019 ransomware cyber attack, that's one example. This incident was connected to the shadow brokers. So whoever this mysterious group is, it still remains a mystery and still sounds made up as shit. It sounds like a DC Comics villain. It's insane. And finally, number 1, motorized roller skates. We'll end on a fun one, because, why not? This last one they've been working on for a very long time and we still can't crack it, right? This is the craziest thing I've ever seen working on this channel, so I gotta end with it. Motorized roller skates, what a nightmare this would be. Imagine if this worked out. Even Elon Musk would see this and be like, no, that's crazy. This photo was taken at the Sunoco station in Hartford, Connecticut. Now, context aside, this is an odd one. A guy with a briefcase is filling up at the gas station and he's wearing roller skates. That would look bad today. You would have SWAT teams rolling up if you saw that, right? It's 1956 and that futuristic looking man right there is Mike Dreschler. Now, at the time, he was working for a Detroit skate company, but he was very close to gas-powered skates. They would have cost around $250, which today is around $2,400. And its max speed was 17 miles an hour. Again, imagine that in the closing act of like a Mission Impossible movie. That's crazy. Now, obviously the public wasn't supposed to see this. They feared that it would encourage folks to get creative on their own and, launch their way to work. So yeah, don't make rocket skates with gasoline. Thanks.
And we're starting off with this photograph of the types of cells that were used to house supposed witches during the Salem witch trials. The Salem witch trials were a very dark and infamous chapter in American history that unfolded in the late 17th century. Taking place in Salem, Massachusetts, the trials were fueled by a climate of fear, superstition, and religious fervor. Accusations of witchcraft spread like wildfire, just tearing apart families and communities. It all began when a group of young girls claimed to be afflicted by strange ailments and started pointing fingers at certain individuals as the source of their suffering, all of which were kind of outcasts in the community. And these accusations quickly snowballed. It led to mass hysteria and just a frenzy of trials. The accused were subjected to flawed and biased legal proceedings. Evidence and confessions were obtained under duress and were deemed admissible, and 19 innocent people were ultimately convicted and put to death. Historical documents and illustrations related to the Salem witch trials were often concealed by authorities seeking to downplay the events and distance themselves from the mass hysteria that was going on at the time. At number 9, we have Pope Pius XII's secret wartime documents. These documents, which were previously hidden within the Vatican's secret archives, were released in 2020, and they reveal some pretty intriguing stuff about the Vatican during World War II and the Pope's relationship with the leader of the Third Reich. These documents, spanning loads of pages, give us a peek behind the curtain, if you will, of Pope Pius's actions during one of the darkest times in history. People were hoping for some concrete answers about the Pope's stance during this time, but it turns out it's a bit of a mixed bag. Apparently there's no definitive evidence in these documents that he actively denounced the actions of the Third Reich, or was at least doing enough to try and help the people. And as it turns out, he even had contact with Mr. H himself. There is also some evidence, of course, he was working behind the scenes to try and aid in the war effort, but historians and scholars are having just a field day with this treasure trove of information, trying to uncover the truth about the Vatican's role in those tumultuous times. At number 8, we have Anneliese Michel. Most of you have probably seen this image before. It's incredibly harrowing, really sticks with you. No amount of horror movie makeup can replicate just how disturbing the image of this poor woman is. The case of Anneliese is a haunting and very tragic tale that unfolded in the 1970s. Anneliese, a young German woman, experienced a series of alarming physical and psychological symptoms that were eventually attributed to demonic possession. Convinced that she was possessed by demons, Anneliese and her family sought help from both medical professionals and the Catholic Church. Unfortunately, her pleas for assistance were met with a blend of misguided religious fervor and a lack of appropriate medical intervention. Anneliese's condition just deteriorated rapidly, and she endured months of grueling exorcism rituals performed by 2 priests. The sessions were physically and mentally tortuous, with Anneliese being subjected to restraints, being denied food, and enduring countless hours of psychological torment. Although there are also stories about her even outright denying food herself, so there was definitely stuff going on here within her brain that just wasn't being properly diagnosed. Throughout this chain of sad events, Anneliese's health worsened. She became emaciated and weakened. The tragedy lies not only in this immense suffering Anneliese endured, but also in the lack of proper intervention. The case raised important questions about the kind of intersection of religion and mental health. It really highlights the danger of neglecting evidence-based medical treatment in favor of superstition. At number 7 on the list, we have a bit of a different one. These are documents and possible images that have been successfully hidden in the Vatican Apostolic Archive, formerly called the Vatican Secret Archive, which I like way better. I love the word secret is actually in the title. I didn't just add it for dramatic effect. We don't just hold archives here. These are secret archives. Anyway, this vast repository located within the walls of Vatican City houses an extensive collection of historical documents spanning centuries. While the term secret may imply sinister activities, the archive's purpose, as it's said, is primarily to preserve and protect sensitive or confidential material related to the Catholic Church. But there's definitely an allure about the unknown, and it's fueled various theories about the existence of possibly dark secrets concealed within those walls. Some speculate that the archive may contain controversial documents related to the church's historical controversies, like the Inquisition, the Crusades, and, as discussed earlier, some stuff about the role of the church during World War II, which came out fairly recently. Others propose that it holds hidden knowledge about the existence of maybe extraterrestrial life or ancient relics that challenge the established religious narratives, but hey, who knows? Next on the list, we have St. Joseph's Orphanage in Vermont. So we have a number of images from inside the walls of this notorious orphanage. They do have a certain old photograph creepiness about them, but for the most part, they're pretty innocuous, but it's the context behind these seemingly innocent photographs that makes them so uncomfortable to look at. Behind the doors of this orphanage were countless instances of mistreatment is really putting it lightly. It was outright horrific what went on here, and when over 100 former residents of the orphanage came forward to make statements about how they had suffered as children in the facility, no charges were made, and the church had turned a blind eye to the cruelty the residents experienced at the hands of the nuns who ran it. The list of crimes committed are just too long to list, but it's so bad that there were actually children who lost their lives at this place, and not by accident. Some were pushed off boats. There's other stories about instances of being pushed out windows by nuns. It's infuriating hearing what went on here. This next image was an engraving by Bernard Picart, a draftsman, illustrator, and engraver from the early 18th century. This image here is his depiction of a torture chamber of the Spanish Inquisition. We see supposed heretics being suspended by ropes. One man has his feet being held to a fire. Picart created a body of work that challenged the religious norms of his time. His art often depicted religious subjects in unconventional ways that questioned the dogma upheld by the Catholic Church at the time. Picart's approach was met with disapproval a lot of the time and condemnation from the church, who considered his interpretations as blasphemous or heretical. But his willingness to depict religious figures and stories in a critical light led to his work being looked down upon and criticized by the church. Up next, we have this image. This is Dennis Rader, someone who upstanding members of the Christian faith would not be proud to learn that he is indeed a believer. Dennis Rader was a notorious American serial killer who terrorized the community of Wichita, Kansas from 1974 to 1991. What made Rader's case particularly chilling was the stark contrast between his heinous crimes and his seemingly normal everyday life. At the time of his arrest in 2005, it was revealed that Rader had served as a church leader, contributing to his image as this upstanding member of society. He was an active member of the Lutheran Church, holding positions such as president of the church council and leader of the Boy Scouts. Rader's role as a church leader and this image he upheld as being this dedicated member of his community only made it more of a shock when he was found out about his crimes. This guy, just an absolute monster. He did some incredibly twisted things that I just can't go into detail here, but just a reminder that no matter how decent people seem on the outside, there could be something much darker going on behind closed doors. Not trying to say you shouldn't trust anybody, just, keep your eyes peeled. Don't be too trusting. At number 3, we have the Salem UFO sighting. This photo may not look all that spectacular compared to some of the actual footage we've seen of possible UFOs today, but just keep in mind that this photo was taken in 1952. It wasn't doctored, and these mysterious glowing lights in the sky have never been explained. Photo was snapped by Coast Guard Officer Shell Alpert in Salem, Massachusetts. What makes this image really stand out is just how clear it is. It's not blurry, it's very obvious that there are 4 glowing discs hovering in the air. Now, in terms of why the church would have tried to hide an image like this, maybe people starting to believe in the presence of extraterrestrial life would have gone against what the Bible laid out. Really, I just put this one on here because it's an intriguing photograph. Number 2, let's change gears for a minute and take a look at a fairly recent image that made headlines when it was first shared on social media back in 2017. It didn't make headlines on major publications or anything, but it was all over the internet at the time. This image looks to be some sort of large winged thing. The picture was taken in Phoenix, Arizona by Richard Christensen, who's just as confused as everyone else as to what he captured on camera. Some said it resembled Mothman, but others said that this shadowy figure resembled an angel or even possibly a demon. Definitely looks more like a harbinger of doom to me. Of course, it could just be a trick of the camera or just an outright hoax, but I think it's a pretty eerie looking photo. And coming in at number 1 is William Tyndale. This image depicts the termination of William Tyndale, who was burned at the stake for doing what, you might ask? turns out is translating the Bible into English. As it turns out, what the Catholic Church was trying to hide here was actually the Bible itself. At least they wanted to keep it out of the hands of everyday people, anyway, which they believed would undermine their power. Tyndale believed that the Bible should be accessible to the common people in their own language, challenging the church's monopoly on biblical interpretation. His translation work, particularly the New Testament, faced opposition from religious authorities who sought to maintain control over religious teachings. The church considered Tyndale's translation as heretical, as it was in direct opposition to their authority, and his efforts were met with resistance, and he was ultimately arrested in 1535. In 1536, he was sentenced for heresy. He was sentenced and condemned to death by strangulation before being burned at the stake.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Mad. This is a photo that was taken of someone known as the Mad. His real name was George Metesky, and he was the man who terrorized New York City for 16 years while he planted explosives in public places like an absolute psychopath. I guess he was apparently angry about a workplace injury he had suffered in the years prior to his terrible crimes, so of course the normal, reasonable jump to make would be not that. While no one should have ever had to suffer because of these crimes, the good news is that while he planted 33 and set off 22 of them, miraculously only 15 people ended up injured in the end. This photo of him behind bars is extremely eerie thanks to his creepy smile and haunting eyes. I might be the only one who feels it, but it just seems like something's off. You know? In our number 9 spot today, we have ancient preparations. This is a photo that isn't necessarily very old, but it's of some stuff that has been around for a lot longer than cameras have. These images were taken in the ancient city of Herxheim, which is located in Germany and dates back to about 7,000 years ago. The photo shows some artifacts which at a first glance don't look too dark or creepy or weird, but just wait. Apparently these artifacts and remains show clear signs of flesh stripping. Yeah, okay, wasn't expecting that one. Apparently this was a process that was part of the preparation before consuming human flesh. So yeah, maybe it is a pretty dark photo after all. I'm not exactly sure how all of these things were used or what exactly the process looks like, but I think that maybe that information might just be better left in the past. In our number 8 spot today, we have the lone scientist. This is a photo that comes to us from shortly after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Many of us of course already know plenty about it, but if unfamiliar, in April of 1986 there was an explosion and fire from a nuclear reactor in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. This explosion happened when there was an issue as they were trying to begin an experiment which was set out to actually make the reactor more safe. Unfortunately, the way this reactor was designed placed too much responsibility in the hands of the operator. One thing led to another, and it was a huge disaster and went on to become one of the worst nuclear disasters in history. The amount of radiation in the air caused alarms at the Forsmark nuclear power plant in Sweden, which was over 1,000 kilometers away, so it certainly wasn't anything to take lightly. That is exactly why this photo of a lone scientist going down into the dark radioactive filled area near the meltdown is so terrifying to look at. It reminds us of the bravery of those who went to help after the disaster, and it also reminds us just how scary some of the things we have on this planet really are. In our number 7 spot today, we have the figures of the fire. This photo is both extremely unsettling and super captivating as it shows a scene after the Great Fire at Madame Tussauds in 1925. Of course, this wax museum is famous for the extremely lifelike wax figures that are created and find their home there, so you can only imagine the aftermath of a fire. These lifelike figures, but with missing heads and appendages, burnt skin and hair, and just clothing in disarray. Seeing this photo for the first time without knowing the story about it was definitely a bit of a confusing and terrifying experience. The heads on the ground really freaked me out for a full 5 seconds. As scary as it is, I'm just glad to hear that it's not real and just some creative casualties rather than what this photo appears to be at first. In our number 6 spot today, we have All Hallows Eve. In this day and age when Halloween time comes around, we see all types of costumes. We see a few spooky scary ones, but for the most part we see princesses or fairies or basketball players, or some sort of pop culture reference, but back in the day, Halloween was a terrifying time. I'm not saying that because people dressed as all these elaborate scary creatures, I just mean that the absolute scraps people would throw together to make a Halloween mask are truly scarier than any creature I could come up with. This photo just shows a nice little family as they're ready to celebrate the spookiest day of the year, and oh my gosh, it is actually terrifying. Like, I feel like I'm looking at a still from the movie Strangers or something. It looks so terrifying, but it's likely just a completely harmless and innocent celebration. Honestly, while I'm kind of over seeing people show up to Halloween parties as cats, I'll take that over a potato sack any day apparently. In our number 5 spot today we have The Experiment. This is a photo that comes from some experiments that were being conducted from the French neurologist Duchenne de Boulogne. He was best known for his use of photographs during his experiments, as evidenced by, well, this video. He was also known for his research into the use of electrical stimulation of muscles, and of course these photos really help to capture exactly that. These photos have gone down in history not even necessarily for what they show medically, but just because of how startling they are and the often grotesque facial expressions seen on the patient. The experiment being conducted in this shot was meant to determine how exactly the muscles in the face produce facial expressions, which he believed at the time were directly linked to the soul of a man. Of course, these strange faces the patient is making are due to the electrical stimulation, but the photos from his experiments truly make it look like the patients are going through some kind of torment or torture. As far as I know, the man in this photo was totally fine both before and after the experiment, despite what it may appear as, which is always what we want to hear. In our number 4 spot today we have The Spectre. This is a photo that was taken in England in 1963, and it became known as the Spectre of the Newby Church. That, of course, is because of the ghostly figure that can be seen in this photo. I'm always a little suspicious of ghost photos. Some are certainly more convincing than others, but Photoshop in 1963 wasn't exactly as accessible and easy as it is now. The photo is said to have been taken by Reverend K.F. Lord inside of the Newby Church, which is located in North Yorkshire, England. Of course, I mean, like many of us are going to do, people were really skeptical of this apparition and just believed that it was a well done case of double exposure, which, to be fair, is entirely possible. The Reverend continued to swear up and down, however, that the photo was not doctored, so at this point there's no proof to prove either side, and it's just a game of he said she said. So what do you guys think? Apparition caught slippin', or is the Reverend making it up? In our number 3 spot today we have the eruption of Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens is a stratovolcano located in Skamania County, Washington. The volcano is best known for its huge and disastrous eruption on May 18, 1980. This photograph comes from the photographer Robert Landsberg, who of course was in the area at the time of the eruption. Before the eruption, he had visited the area in order to photograph and document all of the changes that were happening. On May 18th, he was within a few miles of the volcano when it erupted. Since he unfortunately was so close to the explosion, he knew he would be unable to escape this disaster, so instead of focusing on the impossible, he focused on taking as many pictures as possible. Robert was obviously incredibly brave and dedicated, but he was also very smart. After snapping as many photos as he could, including this one, he then secured his camera in his backpack and covered his backpack with his body. He knew he was unlikely to survive, but he wanted to make sure that these photos did. His body was found 17 days later with his backpack still underneath him. His film was of course developed and has provided geologists with some really valuable insights with his close documentation of the eruption. In our number 2 spot today we have the Boneyard. This is a photo that comes from what is called a boneyard. Basically, the photo was taken during a time when it was normal for overcrowded cemeteries to dig up skeletons after 5 years if the family didn't continue to pay for them to stay buried. Yeah, it's not a great rule, but it happened and it's a part of our weird dark history. This particular photo comes from near the Colon Cemetery in Cuba, and it shows what they did with these dug up bones. They put them in this boneyard that eventually grew to be 30 feet deep. That is so creepy. This photo shows how the area became a popular tourist destination, and this photo is said to have been taken after the Spanish-American War, and it shows 2 American soldiers playing with bones. Maybe not the best idea. I mean, a little respect for those who passed might be in order. It definitely is an eerie sight to behold. In our number 1 spot today we have the crypt. This is a photo that comes to us from the early 1900s, and it shows the area that is beneath the church of Santa Maria della Concezione di Cappuccini, which is located in Rome, Italy. This area is known as the Capuchin Crypt, and it is a little little eerie to say the least. That is because the walls are lined with skeletal remains. It is said that on the walls there are the remains of 3,700 bodies believed to be the Catholic friars who were buried by their order. It is definitely terrifying to look at, and it seems a little nightmare-inducing, but the Catholic order insists it isn't meant to be so macabre. They explain that it's actually meant to be a silent reminder of the swift passage of life on Earth and our own mortality. Well, I can say it definitely does that.
Number 10, boiling. Yeah, throwback to the Middle Ages when we would boil people. Awesome. Any Game of Thrones fans out there? Some of this is too accurate. In 1531, the time King Henry VIII was unfortunately running the show, they made boiling a capital punishment. Say no more. I'm never breaking the law, ever. Not even thinking about it. Poisoning somebody back then was equal to treason, obviously. Therefore, it was agreed that you should be boiled, slowly, might I add, if you were caught tampering with a royal's beverage, their IPA. Know what I mean? You drop a little bit of something in there, you're out. You're getting boiled. That's horrible. That's the worst thing I've heard today. Number 9, the Battle of Zappolino. Turning the calendars back a little further, this time to 1325, the Battle of Zappolino was a large-scale event over a bucket. Yeah, I wish I was joking. War of the Oaken Bucket, that's also what it's referred to as. This beef was between two Italian towns, Bologna and Modena. It all kicked off when soldiers from Modena snuck into Bologna with intentions to steal. What are they gonna steal? Are they gonna steal the Declaration of Independence? No, they're gonna steal a wooden bucket from the city's well, because, you know, resources were quite sparse back then. If you steal a bucket, that's equivalent to stealing, you know, something big. That's like a pretty big heist back then. The Bolognese declared war then, obviously, and then sent in an invading force of 30,000 foot soldiers, as well as 2,000 cavaliers. The city of Modena had a smaller army. They only had 500 infantrymen and 2,000 cavalry forces. Thing is, these guys, they still won. Yeah, even though they had the lower force, they still got it. These guys chased the larger army way back to Bologna while destroying every town in the process. Now, some recall them bringing the bucket back just to taunt the city, which is pretty horrible, but I'm like, yeah, you know what? I kind of would too. I don't know. The bucket is currently on display still in Modena, so if you want to go see it, there you go. Go grab the kids and the wife. Say, hey, we're going on a trip. We're gonna go see a bucket. Yeah, bright and early. Number 8, the hottest wedding in town. It's January 28th, 1393, and you are formally invited to a masquerade ball. Oh, how lucky are you? Let's do this. The French Queen Isabeau of Bavaria is hosting one of the most lavish parties of the decade. When the French royal court was celebrating the marriage of one of the Queen's ladies in waiting, it was a big deal, right? It was a happy day. For some, the best day of their lives. For others at this ball, not so great. King Charles VI, he had 5 companions perform a dance, this, you know, theater routine. They did a performance dressed as beasts. They were committed to the bit, I'll add. They had masks, they had big baggy outfits, lots of linen, and lots of stuffing to appear as if they were real beasts. Good stuff, right? So far, we're having a great time, a dazzling time. The party was going well, wine was spilling, beasts were roaring, but one rule was put into place before this party even started. Absolutely, positively, no candles. Yeah, what an obvious fire hazard that would be, right? Well, the Duke of Orleans, he had a little too much fun prior to this event, and he forgot the first rule of Fire Club when he arrived. The guy walked in with a lit torch. Some accounts say that he dropped the torch by accident, others say that he got too close, trying to guess the identity of one of the beasts. Either way, flames were spread fast, and this tragic event took the lives of 4 people in total. Hence the name you may recognize, Ball of the Burning Men. Number 7, medieval pub night. Okay, it's almost the weekend now. We're starting to get ready to see friends, maybe hit up the local pub. Now, imagine for a second that it's the 14th century. What are we doing, right? You and your friend decide to hit the big city, the big medieval city, right? Check out one of those hot new medieval taverns that every peasant from the north keeps talking about. Now, you can't get an Uber quite yet, so instead, here's what you should expect. For starters, unless you somehow had a horse in the 14th century, bravo, it's like having a Tesla. Nice, must be nice. You were walking quite a ways just to get to the tavern. And if the commute didn't kill you, the disease waiting in the city probably would. Living in the medieval city was horrible. It was isolated, it was dirty, it was filled with rats, crime, strict curfews had to be put into place, violent crimes would happen all night long. Number 6, Roman punishments. This was a form of capital punishment used, of course, in ancient Rome, and also used in the Middle Ages as well, but its origins go back quite a ways. Yeah, metal would be heated up in a cauldron for a very long time, just hot metal, to the point where it was molten, just a soup of minerals. And at that point, they would pour said molten mineral soup down the throat of the accused. Yeah, this is why you don't break the law in the Dark Ages. Say no more. This was for the worst of the worst, obviously. It was execution by molten metal. It was supposedly done to wealthy Roman generals literal Marcus Licinius crosses back in ancient Rome. So yeah, like I said, the OGs go way back. The metal would burn your muscle inside, literally cooking it from the inside out, and after a few moments, of course, it would harden and you would, yeah, horrible? I agree. Let's hit that thumbs up, get the karma back up, get that energy back up, and let's move on. Number 5. Plague rats. Yeah, just kidding, it's all disgusting. Say we go to the medieval pub, right? Say we beat the odds and we arrive. That's a feat in itself. We reserved a table, we're in, now you're with your friends and family, drinking ale, having a great time. Well, it'd be a shame if, say, hundreds of rats started to swarm your feet out of nowhere, right? That'd be pretty mildly uncomfortable while you're trying to eat some soup. Yeah, the plague rolled, or rather crawled, into town back in 1328, and it lasted until 1350. And it was actually horrible. It was so bad. We think of our own plague here in history and we compare it, and I'll tell you one thing. I never saw any swarms of black rats attacking anyone's feet. Didn't see that once over the past few years. By 1530, the European population was reduced by 1/3, and rats were almost entirely to blame. These hairy balls of disease, they passed it on to everybody. They didn't have public transit back then, right? We weren't sharing offices, we weren't spreading disease that way. It was rats running rampant just under your feet. That's disgusting. Number 4. Combat of the 30. Now this battle was arranged beforehand, right? It was bring your shiniest armor and your most golden gal and arrive fancy looking and meet us at the battlefield in Brittany. Both sides got to pick 30 champions each. They had to pick the best knights in all of their land, all to battle each other. One side represents the King of England, the other France. Now this whole thing was arranged by a captain in the French banner named Jean de Beaumanoir. Now this event pulled in a crowd, drinks were served throughout said crowd, and this fight lasted a very long time. Again, it was entertainment. Hours went by and 4 French knights had fallen as well as 2 Englishmen. So they took breaks. It was like a sporting event, really. And by the end of the whole thing, the English ended up surrendering after losing 9 knights, and the French in total lost 6. Number 3, Bacchanalia. Have you ever dreamt of joining an ancient Roman wine cult? Me neither. But in the 2nd century BC, it would have been a perfect time to maybe go and try it out. Ancient Romans, what they would do back then, they would gather in these cultic celebrations, all in the name of Bacchus, the wine god, right? Of course, let's all meet and get naked and drink wine. These gatherings would be held in private, thank God, or quiet areas of the woods. A little creepy, imagine bumping into that. And what they would do is they would dance, they would cook food, eat, drink some more, maybe drink a little too much, and then things would get a little sweaty. They would get a little intimate, if you know what I'm saying. That was the whole point of this Roman cult. You'd gather in small homes to dance the night away, you could say. Some accounts say people would often get poisoned in these ancient wine parties, so by time 186 rolled around, the Roman Senate voted to end these cult gatherings entirely. Number 2, a lot of cheese. 1837, President Andrew Jackson, he knew this, okay? He was ahead of the game. He knew cheese was the main event, so during his last White House party as president, officially, he ordered a 1,500-pound brick of cheese. Then he invited 10,000 of his closest friends, who I hope weren't lactose intolerant, and they all went to town. They made history that day, literally. To move such a unit of cheese to the White House from New York, let's talk about that. Here we go. Officials had to use 24 horses just to move this thing, and it had to sit for 2 years before they could even open it up and dive in. Prepared for 2 years and gone in 2 hours. And finally, number 1, pleasures of the Enchanted Isle. If you think Elon Musk is wasting time and resources, you should have seen King Louis XIV. What a mess. Back in May 1664, King Louis XIV decided to throw a big celebration for his mistress. He told all invited that the party was for his mother, but really the spotlight was on his lady the entire time. How mean is that, right? Already you're like, ugh, what a diva this guy is. This party though, it was a week long. How exhausting is that? Louis went above and beyond to keep the party going. He had fun outfits, a massive fake palace, a big float that looked like a whale, because that's fun, I guess. And of course, to cap it all off, a ballet show, just to finish the week-long festival. And while setting off fireworks on day 7, however, the fake palace caught real fire. And at that point, everybody was ordered to go home.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the fire. This is a photo that comes to us from 2003 at the Station nightclub in Rhode Island, and it shows the band Great White as they perform. While this seems like just a regular photo that someone took on their Motorola Razr, what ensued shortly after this photo was taken is absolutely tragic. Basically, as the band performed, there were some pyrotechnics that were set off, and while this was meant to be a spectacular display, it only ended up in disaster. The fireworks ended up setting all of the flammable acoustic foam in the walls and ceiling on fire, and within 1 minute, everything that was combustible was up in flames. Within 2 minutes, the entire club was fully engulfed in black smoke, and people were having trouble finding exits. In the end, this this fire took the lives of 100 people and another 230 were injured as a result. It has gone down in US history as one of the worst and most deadly nightclub fires. In our number 9 spot today we have the core. This photo shows a physicist named Harold Agnew, and while this looks like a relatively normal, non-threatening photo, what he has in his hand is truly devastating. Harold is holding the nuclear core of what was nicknamed the Fat Man atomic bomb. This means that Harold is holding the nuclear core of the atomic bomb that was later dropped on Nagasaki in 1945. The immediate blast of course took many lives, but so did the long-term effects of the bomb, like radiation illnesses and that sort of thing. It's crazy to look at a photo like this because it seems so perfectly normal when he literally has a life-changing, world-ending device in the palm of his hand. Also, I don't think I could ever hold something like that. Not only would I just not want to, but I don't think I could even get near it for fear of something going wrong. In our number 8 spot today we have the eruption. This is a photo that is showing Mount Pinatubo, which is located in the Philippines, on June 15th, 1991. That is the day that this volcano erupted into what would be the second largest volcanic eruption of the 20th century. Certainly impressive, also extremely terrifying. This photo shows the pyroclastic flow full of hot gas and rock being flung into the air. Eruptive activity in the volcano first started on April 2nd of that year, which prompted researchers to set up seismographs in the area. By June, the volcano was having a group of progressively shallower eruptions before, on June 12th, the volcano had its first spectacular eruption, which sent an ash column 19 kilometers up into the atmosphere. Additional smaller explosions continued on June 13th, which then led to some intense seismic activity. After more highly gas-charged magma reached the surface, on June 15th, the volcano once again exploded, this time sending the cloud of ash 40 kilometers up into the atmosphere. Volcanic ash and pumice blanketed the surrounding areas, and pyroclastic flows filled what were once deep valleys with fresh volcanic deposits. It is truly magnificent and extremely powerful, and this photo shows just that. In our number 7 spot today we have post-war. This is a photo that is said to have been taken in 1946, just after the end of the Second World War. Story goes that the person in this photo is a soldier who had just returned home from war, which would already be difficult and challenging enough, but as he returned home he came to hear the news that unfortunately, despite his survival, his family had lost their lives during the war. There is no doubt about the impact that either world war had on the world, and how the impact doesn't stop once the war is over. These wars changed the course of history, and they changed people's lives forever. This is definitely a difficult photo to look at, and it's an eerie reminder of those dark times. In our number 6 spot today we have the disguise. Speaking of the Second World War, as it began to come to a close, many of the Germans who were involved in all of the many violations of human rights began to flee or try and hide or disguise themselves for fear of being persecuted. One of those was, of course, the worst of them all, Hitler himself. This photo, or rather series of photos, was created by the US government as an attempt to document the many ways that he could have disguised himself in order to escape being recognized and captured. At the time, the fear of him being able to escape responsibility and go on living his life abroad was very real. I mean, there have been others who actually did manage to do just that, and that is exactly the reason for these photos. There's also something kind of interesting and bizarre about what happens when we take away the features of his that we know him by. In the end, he didn't escape and go on to live abroad, but he did escape being held responsible before the world. In our number 5 spot today we have the Titanic. We all know the story of the Titanic. I mean, it's one of the most famous in history, and this photo comes from just before the historic iceberg encounter. On April 10th, 1912, the Titanic set sail on its maiden voyage, heading from Southampton over to New York City. The ship took a couple of stops along the way, one in France, one in Ireland, before setting off for the United States officially, and somewhere along the beginning part of its journey, someone was able to snap a photo of the ship as it sailed. It's not clear exactly where this photo was taken, but it is thought to be the last photo taken of the ship before its tragic end. Considering it was only 4 days after the ship set sail that it hit the iceberg, it is likely that this photo came not too long before the terrible day. In our number 4 spot today we have the lipstick killer. This is a photo that comes to us from December 10th, 1945. If looking at this image gives you a shudder down your spine, that absolutely makes sense, as it was written by a terrible person known as the lipstick killer. This photo is an image of a note he left written on the wall at one of his crime scenes. The photo comes from the apartment of Francis Brown, as just before before he wrote this message, he took her life. After this message was left, he ended up taking the life of one other person because he was finally caught by the police 6 months later. The message scrawled in the photo reads, "For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself." It is an absolutely chilling note with a horrific backstory. In our number 3 spot today, we have bad politics. This is a photo that shows the former First Lady Rosalynn Carter, and you may or may not be wondering who that man next to her is. And to that I say, my friends, that is the horrible, horrible monster that is John Wayne Gacy, aka the Killer Clown. This photo was taken at a Polish Constitution Day celebration in Chicago in 1978, which is the same year that Gacy was arrested for his crimes, so at the point this photo was taken, he had already taken the lives of at least 20 people. The reason he was there and was able to meet the First Lady is because he was not only the worst of the worst, he also somehow became the Democratic precinct captain in the Chicago suburbs in the 1970s, and he was the marshal of the Polish parade. The picture is even signed, quote, "To John Gacy, best wishes, Rosalynn Carter." It's terrible. I hate it so much. I feel very bad for anyone who had to meet him. In our number 2 spot today, we have the first day. This is a photo that shows Dorothy Count Scoggins as she joined her new school. What should be a perfectly normal activity was certainly anything but for Dorothy, as she was the first black person to attend Harding High School in Charlotte, North Carolina, which was previously an all-white school. After the passing of the Purcell Plan in 1956, there were 40 students who applied for transfers, and Dorothy was one of 4 who was accepted. This photo clearly shows that although small steps were being taken within the law to prevent segregation, there were no steps being taken within the students. As Dorothy just tries to get an education, you can see her peers clearly trying to disturb her peace. After 4 days of this kind of treatment, Dorothy's parents ended up withdrawing her from the school over fears for her safety. These images, however, were seen around the world. This photo acts as quite the reminder for where we were really not all that long ago. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Challenger crew. This is a photo that was taken of the clearly very excited Challenger crew as they walked down the ramp ready to head off on their mission. The crew even included 37-year-old Krista McAuliffe, who was a high school social studies teacher. She had won a spot on this mission through a program with NASA called the Teacher in Space program, and she had trained diligently for months in order to be the first non-military person in space. On January 28, 1986, the Challenger mission proved to be fateful just 73 seconds after liftoff. 2 rubber O-rings failed because of the cold temperatures of the morning, and on live television the world watched as the spacecraft broke apart and plunged into the ocean, sadly taking the lives of everyone on board. It is an absolutely tragic event made even more chilling by this final photo.
Starting off this countdown, we have 1930s Halloween. Who here likes Halloween? Smash that like button if you do. And also let me know what your favorite costume is that you've ever worn. Back in the 1930s, Halloween looked a lot different. Obviously, they didn't have a Party City or Spirit Halloween where they could just go to and buy a costume from. No, costumes were often homemade, which makes them look terrifying. Look at this photo. These individuals are in Halloween costumes. I'm sorry, but who are they dressed up as? The women look terrifying with those weird masks on. I would freak out if I saw someone walking down the street dressed like that on Halloween. Like, those are some next level purge masks. They seriously give me the creeps. In our 9th spot, we have the exorcism of Annalise. Annalise was a devout Catholic woman who is said to have been possessed by 5 different demons. It all started one day when she blacked out at school and began walking around all dazed. She didn't remember anything. People around her said that she was in a trance-like state. Soon, these blackouts became more frequently. Things started to get worse and she started to convulse and hallucinate randomly. Eventually, she claimed that she saw the face of the devil and could hear demons whispering in her ears. In the end, she underwent 67 exorcisms, some lasting up to 4 hours. This photo of Annalise shows you in her possessed state. It's very creepy, and her story is honestly so disturbing and scary and sad. Moving on, at number 8, we have the mutated piglet. In 1986 in Ukraine, an accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant caused the reactor to explode. This explosion had lasting effects, and to this day, it's still considered the worst nuclear disaster. A lot of people and animals were affected by this. In fact, the animals that lived there in the late 1980s suffered tremendously from the nuclear waste. This is a picture of a mutated piglet. It was born with a deformity, believed to have been caused by its mother being exposed to the radiation. This pig is now on display at the Ukrainian National Chernobyl Museum, you know, in case you wanted to go and see it up close. In our 7th spot, we have the wake. This photo was taken in around the 1920s during a wake for the man featured in the photo. Well, directly to the left of the photo by the two mourning individuals appears to be a ghostly apparition. Is this the deceased man still lingering over his body? Or is it another ghostly entity? Well, we don't know for sure. But what we do know is that this photo is very, very creepy. I mean, you can see the ghost as clear as day. Hopefully it's just the man saying one last goodbye before going to the afterlife and not a demon. Coming in at number 6, we have the Mickey Mouse gas masks. Did you know that Walt Disney once designed a very creepy gas mask for children? Yeah. So the use of chemical war during World War II made it so everyone would carry around a gas mask with them, just in case. So in 1942, Mr. Disney himself invented a Mickey Mouse inspired gas mask. It was meant to calm terrified kids. Yes, I will repeat, this was meant to calm terrified kids. And clearly scare parents, because that seriously is nightmare fuel. Imagine seeing people walking around wearing those. No thank you. That's anything but comforting. Mickey looks like a demon. Anyways, with the help of the Sun Rubber Company, about 1,000 of these masks were made. They thought kids would be more inclined to wear them if they were in the shape of a fun-loving mouse. But in the end, they just turned out to be fairly creepy, like if you agree. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the expressionless. So this creepy looking mannequin thing is a dummy that nurses would use in training back in 1968. Okay, if I was a nurse and had to pretend that that was my patient, bro, I'd quit. She looks terrifying. Anyways, that's all I could find about this dummy. Like, I'm not sure if they would practice CPR on her or what. But you may recognize this photo because it inspired the creepypasta called The Expressionless. So the creepypasta is fake, but the photo and the dummy is very much real. I swear, did they purposely make the dummy terrifying to scare the nurses or what? In our 4th spot, we have Gas Mask Island. About 110 miles south of Tokyo, Japan, there's a small island called Miyakijima, otherwise known as Gas Mask Island. How did it get its name? Well, this island is home to Mount Oyama, a very active volcano that emits poisonous sulfuric gas. So all of the residents have to carry gas masks with them at all time. You know, just in case these gas levels rise unexpectedly. This photo shows the residents of the island wearing their gas masks. And I know what you're thinking. This photo looks like it came straight out of an end of the world horror movie. I agree, it's insane. You thought wearing medical masks was bad? Imagine wearing a gas mask around town. Would not be fun. Moving on to number 3, we have post-mortem photography. So back in the day, there was an interesting trend that people would follow, which was post-mortem photography, aka taking photos with a person who was recently deceased. So the woman in the middle of this photo has sadly passed away. So they did this for a number of reasons. It was a way to deal with their grief. It helped preserve the image of the loved one that passed away, and it was also a little memento. This trend became common in Victorian England when there was a rise in short lifespans for the young, which is sad. And in a way, this is a sweet way to preserve the memory of a loved one. But it's creepy. Hella creepy, you have to admit it. Coming in at number 2, we have the crucifixion. This creepy photo from 1890 Germany is of a woman who suffered from mental health issues. This was their method of treatment. They thought that this would cure her. Basically, they locked her in a cellar for 12 hours a day. For those 12 hours, she was changed up in the crucifixion pose. Apparently, this was supposed to cure her mental illness. Okay, I'm no psychologist or, doctor, but that alone would drive me insane and make everything worse. Now, this was done for a number of reasons. They thought that when you make someone pretend to be crucified, they will think, well, good thing I'm not actually being crucified. Hey, my life isn't that bad. Bingo, problem solved. No, honey, no, it does not work like that, I'm sorry. And in our number 1 spot, we have the haunting photo. Ready to not be able to sleep tonight? Take a look at this photo. This is the creepiest thing I have ever seen. This is just a normal family photo taken back in the day, but the camera quality makes them all look like ghosts. I'm sorry, but that man is not human. He's like a zombie ghost. Those eyes, don't stare into them for too long or else he's going to possess you, I swear. Even the baby looks hella creepy. They literally look like a family of ghosts or demons. They're gonna haunt me in my dreams, I swear.
In our number 10 spot, we have the Moko Mokai collection. Well, we are starting off strong with a truly scary and disturbing photo. This is a photograph of a man named Major General Horatio Gordon Robley, who had a collection of 35 heads that he stole from the native Maori people. Apparently in New Zealand, there were people called Maori that preserved the heads of fallen people. The heads were chopped off, boiled, smoked, dried in the sun, and then dipped in a shark oil before being displayed like a trophy. Whoa. They are known as the Moko Mokai. Anyways, these heads were robbed by the British when they moved into New Zealand, and this pic is one of the guys who stole them. Honestly, the man feels just as chilling to look at as the heads. Does anyone else agree? It's probably because he's holding something that looks like it could be a sharp object that might have helped in the chopping process. I don't know, could be just me. In our number 9 spot, we have the woman in the attic. Well, the story behind this picture is extremely chilling, so chilling that I definitely threw on some show tunes and sang for a moment after reading about it. In case you're curious, Wicked is always my musical of choice. Speaking of Wicked, this was not planned, I swear. The woman in this photograph is a real woman who had a wicked mother who locked her in an attic for 25 years. An anonymous tip to the authorities in 1901 was how she was found, 55 pounds in a room filled with feces, old meat, and insects. Thankfully, she was okay health-wise, but mentally, as you can expect, not so much. This is a photo of her and how she was found. Truly horrible to see. While looking at this photograph and seeing her long brown hair, I'm now convinced that this is where Disney got some of their inspiration for the movie Tangled. There are way too many similarities that I'm sure they took and made 1,000 times more light and cheery. In our number 8 spot, we have For Sale. This is a photograph from 1948 that honestly at first glance I thought it to be some kind of joke. Maybe the young ones in the photograph were being bad and the mom was threatening to sell them. You know, the old tricks parents would play when children's aid wasn't a phone call away. Anyways, apparently this is a picture of something very real that was happening due to poverty at the time, and that instantly makes the picture chilling and sad. Apparently the mother and father of these young ones, Mr. and Mrs. Chalifo, needed money desperately, and so they sold them. It was said that the mother was paid to stage this photo, and perhaps that is why there is an air of phoniness to it, but no later than 2 years after, all of their young ones had been sold to families. In our number 7 spot, we have On the Brink of Death. A man by the name of Robert Overacker decided that he wanted to raise awareness for the homeless. And how was he going to do it? Oh, by doing a stunt that would attract the masses. He was going to jet ski over Niagara Falls. And this is a picture of him doing just that. This was the last picture of him taken as he fell to his death, as his parachute did not open as planned. Apparently one of the police officers at the Niagara area has said that it would have been like hitting cement as he fell 180 feet. Wow. What a haunting photo to look at. He was only 39 as well. This is why I will never skydive because, well, there isn't a 100% survival rate, so there's that. Also, I'm a chicken, so there's also that. In our number 6, we have the two-headed dog. I always feel like puking when I see this photo. It is just the most inhumane thing ever, and it makes my heart hurt to look at. This is a photo that was taken in the 50s of the Soviet scientist Vladimir Demikov and his science experiment, the two-headed dog. He beheaded the head off of one of the dogs and attached it to the other dog. He sewed their circulatory systems together and connected their vertebrae with plastic strings, and after the surgery was completed, both of the heads could hear, see, smell, and act as a normal dog would.
The dog survived only 4 days before passing away. This scientist's research led to the creation of transplants, but wow, was this a horrible thing to have done. Also, he apparently only did this experiment due to boredom, so perhaps my anger stems from having learned that. In our number 5 spot, we have Mary Reeser. This is a picture of a blown up Mary Reeser. This picture showcased quite the story from its time. On July the 2nd of 1951 in St. Petersburg, Florida, a woman by the name of Mary Reeser somehow caught fire, and all that remained was a part of her skull and her left leg surrounded by her ashes. She was discovered by her landlady, and after the investigation, the police were unable to say as to how she could have possibly caught fire. It was this story where the idea of spontaneous human combustion was theorized, but scientists today say that they are almost certain that this could not be the case. But what is weird is that most of her house was largely devoid of fire damage, so it makes no sense. I suppose we shall never know, and this picture will continue to scare us till the end of time. In our number 4 spot, we have the truck stop killer. In the 70s, there was a killer by the name of Robert Ben Rhodes who would pick up while he was driving his commercial truck across America, and then he would kill them. He was suspected to have taken the life of over 50 women. Anyways, when he was finally caught, a picture of a named Regina K. Walters was found along with many other photos of women inside Robert's home. This photo is believed to be taken right before he killed Regina. Man, oh man, how horrible. This is quite chilling to look at. Sometimes I'm so surprised when evidence like this is leaked to the public. This must have been haunting for her family and friends to see. In our number 3 spot, we have the Radium Girls. This is another chilling photo of a girl that was a part of the Radium Girls, which were a number of women known for working at factories in the 20s where they were exposed to so much radium that they actually would come home glowing in the dark. Unfortunately, the prolonged exposure caused them to have a series of problems, such as their jaws began to swell up and fell off, their vertebrae would collapse, and eventually they passed of cancer. So knowing that this is a pic of one of those women makes this picture so much worse than it looks. However, it does already look like a scary picture of a woman in pain. Pretty scary to think about the amount of people working in factories today or working with technology that might bring about future death that we haven't been able to predict yet. In our number 2 spot, we have Annalise Michel. Yeah, this picture will definitely give you the heebie-jeebies even without knowing the backstory. But what if I told you that this is a pic of a woman that was believed to be possessed by the devil? Yeah, this photo just got 100 times scarier, didn't it? Yeah, well, this is a photo of a young lady by the name of Annalise, and she was a pretty devout Catholic German and grew up in the 60s. She was completely normal until she suddenly started hallucinating, eating spiders, routinely convulsing, and just drinking her own urine. She claimed that the devil was possessing her, and she would later go on to have 67 exorcisms. Nothing worked, and she ended up passing away from malnutrition at the age of 23. Her tale is what inspired the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Yep, deeply chilling. In our number 1 spot, we have the Pioneer's Defense. Save the best for last. This is probably one of the creepiest photos that I have ever seen. This is a historical image taken by the Russian photographer Viktor Bula in 1937. If it isn't creepy enough without the explanation, here's the explanation. These are people that were part of a Soviet youth group called the Young Pioneers, and they are wearing gas masks because they were in the middle of a military preparation drill, as this was during a time when Joseph Stalin was the dictator and no one knew if death was around the corner. Yikes. Sometimes I am so thankful to be alive right now. Even though it does seem as if we're going through a bit of a mental war in this day and age, a physical war is way scary to think about being a part of.
Number 10. SS Watertown. In December 1924, James Courtney and Michael Meehan were crew members on the SS Watertown. They were cleaning a cargo tank of the oil tanker, and they were overcome by gas fumes, which resulted in both of their deaths. Due to this, the crew buried them at sea, but to their astonishment, the ghostly faces of the soldiers appeared in the water the next day. Yeah, like in the waves. Later on, many other crew members reported seeing the faces as well. The faces were so visible that the captain of the ship ordered them to take a picture of them to have for proof, you know, so people didn't think that they were crazy. And this was smart, because if someone told me they saw faces of two dead men in the water, I would probably never talk to them again and think that they were cuckoo. Although, in the picture, you can clearly see two faces, which is just plain creepy. When the SS Watertown returned to land, the negative was even checked for fakery and proclaimed genuine. So yeah, just two faces chilling in the waves. No big deal. Number 9. The nurse. This photo was taken in an abandoned tuberculosis hospital in Louisville, Kentucky called Waverly Hills Sanatorium in 2006. As you can imagine, many people passed away here, and it's rumored to be filled with paranormal activity. In recent years, it has become one of America's most popular destinations for ghost hunters. This image depicts a woman just standing to the right side, but when the photo was taken, no one was there. It was a ghost. It has been agreed among the paranormal community that the photo depicts Mary Lee, a nurse who took her own life in the hospital. The story goes this poor woman was impregnated by a doctor who worked in the hospital, but later wanted nothing to do with her. Nowadays, she wanders the halls of the hospital and interacts with ghost hunters. Number 8. Tulip Staircase. Reverend Ralph Hardy, a retired clergyman from White Rock, British Columbia, took this famous photograph in 1966. Originally, he only wanted to take a picture of the elegant tulip staircase in the Queen's House section of the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, England. And I mean, I don't blame him. They're pretty. But upon development, the photo revealed a shrouded figure climbing the stairs. It's strange and unsettling, and Ralph said there was no one else in the frame when he took it. Experts who examined the original negative concluded that it had not been tampered with. The vicinity of the staircase is rumored to be haunted, and unexplained footsteps have often been heard there, so it's most likely something supernatural who just wanted their photo taken. Number 7. The Brown Lady. The Brown Lady of Raynham Hall is a ghost that reportedly haunts Raynham Hall in Norfolk, England. It became one of the most famous hauntings in the United Kingdom when photographers from Country Life magazine claimed to have captured its image. According to the legend, the Brown Lady is the ghost of Dorothy Walpole, the sister of Robert Walpole, generally regarded as the first Prime Minister of Great Britain. She was the second wife of Charles Townshend, 2nd Viscount Townshend, who was notorious for his violent temper. The story goes that when Charles discovered that his wife had committed adultery with Lord Wharton, he punished her by locking her in her rooms in the family home, Raynham Hall. According to Mary Wortley Montagu, Dorothy was in fact entrapped by the Countess of Wharton. She invited Dorothy over to stay for a few days, knowing that her husband would never allow her to leave, not even to see her children. She remained at the Raynham Hall until her death in 1726 from smallpox. This is just an extremely sad story, and I can't imagine her pain. The first sighting of the Brown Lady was in 1835, and the photograph was taken in 1936. Number 6. Falling through the ceiling. Back in the 1950s, the Cooper family from Texas moved into their new house. Once there, they took a family photo, which seems normal, right? Well, not for them. When the picture was developed, the image of a body falling from the ceiling was clearly visible. To be clear, no one fell from the ceiling when they took the photo, so what happened? As further investigation on the story has brought no plausible explanation, there exist many speculations, including one that argues that the shadow is the ghost of the previous owner of the house. But my question is, why is he falling from the ceiling, and why did he have to ruin that beautiful family photo? I remember seeing this photo on the internet when I was probably too young to see it, and after all these years, this image still gives me chills. Ugh. Number 5. Backseat Ghost. On March 22nd, 1959, Mabel Chinnery and her husband drove to the graveyard in which her mother had been buried. Her mother had died a week previously, and they were going to take photos of her grave, and they did. As Mabel returned to the car, she decided to use her last remaining shot to take a candid picture of her husband waiting in the vehicle on the passenger side. Nothing was out of the ordinary, it was just a random photo, but when the pictures were developed, one of Mabel's friends pointed out that someone, believed to be her mother appeared to be behind her husband in the back seat of the car. Now, was the figure her mother or some other spirit? Who knows? I mean, they were in a graveyard, it could have been anyone or anything. The photograph itself wasn't seen in the United States until the story got a whole page in the Sunday newspaper. Mabel stated that the spot where the unexpected figure appeared in the back of the car is where her mother always sat when they went for drives, so it makes sense that it could be her. An unnamed photo expert is quoted as saying, "The lady in the back can't be the result of a double exposure. If it were, the door's upright wouldn't block off part of her face, and she can't be a reflection in the window either." So maybe it really is Mabel's mother. Number 4. Wem Ghost. On November 19th, 1995, Wem Town Hall burned to the ground in Wem, Shropshire, located in England. During the fire, Tony O'Rahilly, a sewage farm worker who was also an amateur photographer, was originally stopped by police from approaching the burning building. He took a picture of the blaze from across the street with a 200mm lens. It appeared to depict the image of a young girl in the doorway of the burning building. Now, to be clear, there were no injuries or fatalities from the fire. This was not a human. Locals who saw the photo believed it was the ghost of Jane Churm, a young girl who was accused in 1677 of starting a fire in the same town. The image of the girl in the doorway of the burning building was not noticed by Tony, the photographer, or the onlookers. It only appeared after the photo had been developed. I mean, if she was accused of starting a fire and then she popped back up in an area where another fire started, it seems like it really could be Jane. Number 3. The Spectre of Newby Church. The Spectre of Newby Church is the name given to a figure in the photograph taken in the Church of Christ the Consoler on the grounds of Newby Hall in North Yorkshire, United Kingdom. The image was taken in 1963 by the Reverend Kenneth F. Lord. As the figure appears to resemble a human, much speculation has been had regarding what type of person might be in the image. Most speculation by believers has concluded that it resembles a 16th century monk with a white shroud over his face, possibly to mask leprosy or another disfigurement. Others believe it looks like a plague doctor from the 16th and 17th centuries. Initial claims suggest that the figure would measure at 9 feet tall, but its feet are not visible, so it could easily be standing on a box, giving the impression of height. Some people thought the photo was due to double exposure, but photographic experts have concluded that the image is not the result of double exposure. So what was it, and why was it in a church? No one truly knows, but it's extremely frightening. What does it look like to you? Let me know in the comments. Number 2. Mystery Guest. On January 22nd, 1985, the Coventry Freeman organization and their guests stood in prayer during a dinner event. All the guests are still, and as it was a dark room, the photographer probably thought it would be the perfect time to allow for a longer than usual exposure to get enough light into the picture. Makes sense. Now, nothing was out of the ordinary at the time, but as people started to see the print of the picture, a mystery surfaced. Who was the robed figure standing near the end of one of the tables? No one had dressed up for the event, and no one remembers anyone standing there as they stood for prayer. The figure also seems to be taking part in the prayer, head slightly bowed, hands clasped in front. St. Mary's Coventry, Warwickshire is where the event was hosted. It has many legends of ghosts and paranormal activity, but I wonder why this being decided to join in prayer. It just gives me bad vibes, like evil lurks within it. And coming in at number 1 is the Young Boy. One of the most famous haunted houses in the United States is the Dutch Colonial House at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York. The haunting stems from the night of November 13th, 1974, when 23-year-old Ronald Defoe ended the lives of all 6 members of his family. He was then arrested, convicted, and given 6 concurrent life sentences. In December of 1975, George and Kathy Lutz, along with their 3 children, moved into the house and claimed that spooky things were happening. For example, George would wake up at 3:15 every morning, which was the approximate time that Ronald committed his crimes. Kathy said she would feel a ghostly presence and be embraced by it. All of this and more caused the family to flee in fear after only staying in the house for 28 days, and honestly, I don't blame them. Due to this, demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren visited the house and set up time-lapse infrared cameras and caught this photo. The picture wasn't made public until 3 years later when George Lutz appeared on the Merv Griffith Show in 1979. Believers of the haunting think that the picture is the ghost of the youngest Defoe son, John Matthew, who was 9 at the time. Others believed it's a staged photo, but despite its controversy, this picture is one of the most frightening images from the Amityville horror.
Alright, starting off this list in our number 10 10 spot, we have the reflecting pool. This is one of the creepiest or most chilling images ever taken. It depicts a young girl in a graveyard who is looking down at her reflection in a pond. Okay, maybe a little eerie, but not exactly chilling. What really makes this photo what it is, however, that there are seemingly two different reflections looking back up at the little girl. No one knows who this girl is, where she is, or when this photo was taken, but it is estimated to have come from somewhere around the early 1900s. This photo was analyzed, and it has been said that it is unaltered or edited. Who knows how this photo was possible? Maybe there was some sort of invisible entity standing beside her that we could only see the reflection of, like a reverse vampire or something. In our number 8 spot today, we have Bikini Island. Bikini in the Marshall Islands was once inhabited by around 170 islanders until 1945 rolled around. The US president at the time, Harry Truman, ordered that the military continue to test nuclear weapons just in case they were needed in the future, since this was just shortly after the end of World War II. Unfortunately, Bikini was the place that was chosen to be the testing site, since all planes and ships traveled on routes that weren't close to the area. The residents of the island were asked to vacate, quote, for the good of mankind and to end all world wars, to which they of course obliged, under the impression that they would one day be able to move back. Test weapons were detonated on the reef itself, on the sea, in the air, and underwater, and this photo shows what was happening during just one of those tests, and it wasn't even the largest one. Although the former residents of Bikini were promised that they would one day be able to return home, the island still remains uninhabited because of the mass amounts of radiation that still exists there. In our number 8 spot today, we have this huge grasshopper. This photo is allegedly undoctored, or at least that's what people once believed, but as it turns out, this photo actually comes from a line of joke postcards. Thank God. Apparently it was a hilarious hit back in the day to create postcards depicting a super ungodly large kind of grasshopper, like the kind that would make me line up first for a trip to Mars if I saw one hopping around here on Earth. Or should I say, leaping. Like for a second, just imagine. With how high regular tiny grasshoppers can jump, this thing would be jumping into the clouds for sure. Also, like, what would it eat? No thank you to large bugs, especially ones that can jump. I'm just so glad that this one turned out to be fake. Even though it's fake, I wish this was still one that they withheld from the public. And our number 7 spot today, we have these prohibition barrels. The prohibition was the outlaw of the consumption of alcohol, which was done with a ban being placed on the production, importation, transportation, and sale of alcohol by the US government from 1920 to 1933. This ban certainly did not stop people from producing or consuming alcohol, it was just done in sneakier ways. The black market for alcohol was booming as people began to drink redistilled industrial alcohol instead. This photo shows how big the black market industry for alcohol was, as it shows a massive stack of liquor barrels that were collected by the authorities in 1924 about to be set ablaze. The people look so tiny standing next to this insane amount of alcohol. While the prohibition is generally regarded as a failure, the biggest failure it caused was the unintended organized crime it put into life in America. In our number 6 spot today, we have this neighborhood nuclear test. This photo shows a mother and her young son looking out the window and witnessing a nuclear test explosion from the comfort of their own home in 1953. Like, what? Imagine seeing that from your window now in 2021. People would be going wild. Of course, any kind of nuclear test should be done as far away from where people live as possible. I know it's not like the test was being done in their front yard or anything, but still, I certainly wouldn't be comfortable with them testing a nuclear bomb anywhere near the place I live. This photo was of course taken before the effects of nuclear radiation from these kind of explosions were publicly understood. Actually, people have suggested that the public knowledge of these kinds of side effects were suppressed during this time in order to avoid controversy about them testing these kinds of weapons in your neighborhood. While that would of course be something insane to witness firsthand, thankfully the now widely known health risks associated with this sort of thing has caused this to not be a common occurrence. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Boston Marathon. This photo comes to us from 1967 and it depicts the struggles that Catherine Switzer went through in order to be the first female to finish the Boston Marathon. This photo shows race organizers as well as other participants trying to stop her from running the marathon that she trained for and was more than capable of completing. She has written a book that explains in great detail all the things she went through that day and how the critiques and opinions about a woman running the race started even before she had registered to run. People in our history like Catherine are incredibly important, as well as photos like these, because they show when people were literally trying to drag her down, she just kept on running. In our number 4 spot today, we have a traffic jam. On Sunday, September 3rd, 1967, Swedish Hayden changed from driving on the left-hand side of the road to driving on the right-hand side of the road. Why? Well, I'm not exactly sure considering people downvoted the idea before it was implemented and it cost a ton of money to make the switch. Not to mention it's also super confusing for basically everyone, and when we're talking about driving, the simpler the better. Traffic lights had to be reversed, road signs changed, intersections redesigned, lines on the roads repainted, buses modified, and bus stops moved. What happened when the change was implemented? Well, that's what this photo will show you. Absolute chaos. However, after the initial shock, things did start to get better, as because drivers were much more cautious in the time following the switch, the number of traffic accidents actually dropped for a little while before inevitably rising again. Was the switch worth it? Well, no one is sure about that, but what are they gonna do? Change it back? In our number 3 spot today, we have the 3 Jacksons. On August 21st, 1934, 3 fearless acrobats known as the 3 Jacksons, Jarlee Smith, Jewel Waddick, and Jimmy Kerrigan, all performed a routine on the edge of the Empire State Building, which is when this photo was captured. It is said that these 3 toured as an acrobatic trio, and this stunt the photo captured was done at 1,245 feet. According to officials from the Empire State Building, it is said that this was the first time the stunt was attempted, and to this day, it has never been done again, which makes a lot of sense. While this photo is absolutely incredible and is such a testament not only to the trust they shared, but also their abilities as acrobats, I don't know who in their right mind would try to recreate this. We already have one, and I think we can just all be happy with that. In our number 2 spot today, we have the man who fell from space. Vladimir Komarov was a cosmonaut, Soviet test pilot, and aerospace engineer. He was one of the most highly experienced and qualified people, which is exactly why he was chosen for some of the very first space missions. He became the first Soviet cosmonaut to fly into space twice. Unfortunately, however, on one of these missions, things went seriously awry. A parachute failure caused his capsule to crash into the ground after re-entry on the 24th of April in 1967. He literally fell from space, and regardless of if you know anything about space and re-entry, that would have been absolutely terrifying and awful. He of course didn't make it, but the entire process left his remains almost unrecognizable. This photo shows his colleagues looking onto his remains before he was laid to rest. The contributions of people like Vladimir have allowed us to go further into space and understand more than we ever could have imagined. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Gadget. This photo shows the first ever atomic bomb, and it comes to us from 1945. Called the Gadget, this bomb was an implosion plutonium device that was detonated in the Trinity test in 1945. This photo shows someone sitting next to it so casually, like it's a PB&J sandwich and not this world-changing device. The Trinity test was the very first time a nuclear weapon was detonated, and the Gadget was actually the same design as the bomb that was later detonated over Nagasaki, Japan on August 9th, 1945. There's such an eerie nature about this photo and the seemingly casual behavior of the man next to it. Did he know what this was about to unleash? Perhaps, but maybe not.